sunny conditions coming up this weekend, but as it is, every single day, it's good to have you along for the ride. Spence Checketts behind the mic. That's Porter Larson behind the glass. Jam-packed 4-hour radio show for you guys today on this Wednesday afternoon as we get you halfway through that work week and one day closer to the weekend. We got a lot to do on the show. The second half, quote-unquote, of the NBA season begins tonight. The Jazz are in action tomorrow, taking on OKC. The Jazz are in the middle of a 9-game homestand, and they've got 7 games left at home, so your chance to see the Jazz before they hit the road. Tonight it's going to be the Lakers and the Hornets. They'll get the second half of the NBA season going, so we'll do some pro basketball on the show today, some Jazz basketball on the show today, get you ready for the final portion of the NBA season. We'll also do some college basketball. BYU just dog-walked Kansas last night. They undressed them on national television. It was embarrassing for Kansas and for Bill Self. A 34-point win that honestly could have been worse because Kansas, and we're going to talk about this. This is going to sound like a slight to both Utah and BYU. I've watched Kansas a bunch this year and watched every minute of both the BYU and Utah games and the wins that both those teams had over Kansas. I am wildly unimpressed with the Jayhawks this year. Like, that defense last night, BYU, those were practice jumpers. Step in, walk in, wide open corner threes. So we'll get to it on the show. We'll do some college basketball on the show today. And BYU, as a result of a dominant win last night in Provo in front of a great crowd at the Marriott Center. A lot of love today, up to number 31 in the net, up to number 31 in the Ken Pom rankings. Our good buddy Ken Pomeroy stops by the show from time to time. And BYU now with 5 games left at Arizona State, home against West Virginia, on the road at Iowa State, then home against Utah. There's a chance that Brigham Young is a team that could win 11 or 12 conference games in this Big 12 landscape, which is really hard to do. They have the inside track now to be the number 5 seed in the Big 12 tournament. And you got to give them a lot of credit, man. When that team knocks down shots, they are really, really tough. University of Utah, after beating both Kansas and K-State, 5 games left for the Utes at UCF, at Arizona, home against Arizona State and West Virginia, and then on the road against BYU. Utah has 7 conference wins. Can they go 3-2 down the stretch? It's a tough ask. They'll probably have to get it. Well, they definitely will have to at least get one road win. Probably at UCF is going to be your best chance, but UCF is a solid, not great team this year. They're around 500. Then at Arizona is going to be a tough task for anybody. Home against ASU and West Virginia. And then on the road against BYU. And, of course, BYU is going to have a lot of revenge on the mind, and they're a different team now than they were back when they rolled up here to Salt Lake City and took an L with them down to Provo. So 5 games left for the Utes. A 3-2 finish would allow them to win 10 games in conference, and that is a really, really good sign for the direction of Utah men's basketball. So we'll get to some college hoops on the show today. Of course, in addition to the landscape of the NBA, the latest with the NFL offseason. Franchise Tag Day was yesterday, and now a lot of NFL decisions to be made. The NFL salary cap is going to increase at least $22 million in 2025. So the latest on the world of pro football. It's kind of a quiet time in college football outside of the meetings going on right now in New Orleans with the power brokers from the Big Ten. Wish it was the Big 12, but the Big Ten of the SEC. The latest with some of those meetings, the latest on the potential change to the CFP format. A lot of things were rolled back this week by the Trump administration, Department of Education, causing a lot of chaos and ultimately a lot of people not knowing what the future of the business of the college athletics landscape is going to be. And a lot of those things are being discussed in New Orleans this week. But it's just 2 conferences, and they're basically telling people what's what, and that's just kind of how it is. So we'll keep you up to date now on these meetings that are going on in New Orleans, because I know you all love some college football. If anything comes out while we are on air, we will bring it to you. Real Salt Lake is starting their season, kind of, at 4:30 Mountain Time. RSL Herediano, I think that's how you say it. Don't tweet at me. Soccer fans are the worst, man. They get mad when you don't talk about it. Then when you talk about it, you're not good enough at it. Okay, whatever. But that's going to be a 4:30 start. RSL is in action. And then they're going to be in action coming up MLS play. They'll open it up against San Jose. San Jose's new striker is named Chicho Arango. And that's going to come your way this weekend. So soccer season is also here. A lot to do Wednesday show, we'll start with Zach Harper, NBA Daily Assist. We'll look back a little bit on All-Star Weekend. I'm already over the topic of how to fix it because you can't. But mostly we'll look at the second half of the NBA season, do a little jazz basketball as well with Zach Harper today. Chris Kamrani typically stops by on Fridays. He'll roll in studio today at 3 o'clock. Neil Smith, former general manager of the New York Rangers, New York Islanders, one of the lead scouts for the Detroit Red Wings for a long, long time. Neil's going to stop by today because tomorrow is the final of the Four Nations face-off. And if I remember correctly, Neil was not all that pumped about the potential of what this could be. And our guy's going to have to eat a little crow today. I mean, if you've been watching the news cycle, if you're consuming, I don't know, daily shows like the ESPN or the Fox shows, or you're watching SportsCenter, it is leading shows and leading coverage, as a lot of people, over 5 million people, watched the semifinal between Canada and the U.S. up in Montreal. Now, Montreal, with 100-plus years of hockey history, will the city of Boston step up the way Montreal did? We'll see. Boston's a great hockey city, and we've got Matthew Tkachuk and Brandon Hagel going head-to-head as far as a lot of trash talking, going back and forth with their words after they went back and forth with their fists during the semifinals. The first fight of the three in the 9 minutes was Matthew Tkachuk and Brandon Hagel, who are rivals in the NHL. Both play in Florida, but Matthew is with Florida, and then Brandon is with Tampa Bay. So we'll see. This is going to be fun. Already excited about it, even though it is tomorrow. So we'll bring in Neil Smith. And then after Neil, we bring in the voice. That's right, the voice of the Utes, Bill Riley, who called that game over the weekend as Utah beat Kansas, and Bill is a Kansas alum. So we'll do some college basketball and some college football with Riles coming up on a Wednesday. We've got Zach Harper. We've got Chris Kamrani, Neil Smith, Bill Riley, me, Spence Checketts, all of you, the great listeners on this Wednesday afternoon. And that young fella is named Porter Larson on a Wednesday. Did you catch much of that massacre? BYU they wiped the floor with the Jayhawks in Provo last night.
They did, and I did see some of that game, and you mentioned it, right? There were a lot of really, really uncontested shots, and that's not a discredit to BYU. When you're shooting the way BYU was last night, and you're grooving the way that they were, you're gonna win most times than not. That's the difference between basketball and some other sports, is that if you're hot or a particular couple of players are hot, there's just no beating that particular team on that night. But Kansas didn't help themselves. And they lost to both of the local teams, the Utes and BYU, over the weekend. And now the Big 12 standings are they're getting pretty interesting as the home stretch gets here.
Yes, they are, and we'll see what the final 4 or 5 games left in conference means for both Utah and BYU. Zach Harper is our first guest out of the gates on this Wednesday afternoon. But before we get to Zach, courtesy of our good friends at Prize Picks, it is time now for your opening tip on a Wednesday afternoon. Now, Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. You can run your game all season long on Prize Picks. You can win up to 1,000 times your money. It's the best place to get sports action in more than 30 states, including California, Texas, Georgia, Florida, and, of course, Utah. Join over 10 million users and sign up today. Use the promo code ESPN700 and get $50 instantly when you play just $5. Don't even need to win to receive that $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. So sign up today. Get $50 instantly when you play just $5. And use that promo code ESPN700, and they'll hook you up. All right. So as we've talked about this during Crosstalk with Sean, and Porter and I were just kind of bantering back and forth. You know, the Kansas Jayhawks are the winningest program in the history of college basketball. They are the bluest of blue bloods in this conference, and there's no argument, there's no debate. Bill Self has been coaching at Kansas for 22 years. For the first 20 years, Bill Self never lost more than 6 conference games. Last year, they lost 8. This year, they've already lost 7. They're going to drop out of the top 25. They found themselves in a buzzsaw last night down to the Marriott Center in front of a crowd that looked awesome on television. The Rock student section certainly has evolved over the past 7-8 years. That's a tough place to play. It always has been, but it feels a little bit more intense and different now. Shout out to the game ops department down in Provo. They're doing a great job. And BYU came out early. They threw the first few haymakers, and they never stopped. It was 8-0 after 90 seconds. Bill Self took a timeout. And Kansas never even threatened. In the two games Kansas played here in the state, up here in Salt Lake City over the weekend against the Utes, and then down in Provo last night against BYU, they did not lead either game for 1 second. That is wild. This was the preseason AP #1 basketball team for the second year in a row. Now, last year was a little easier to explain. They lost their best player, got hurt, then everything fell apart from there. But everybody applauded their transfer class, their returning class. Hunter Dickinson came back, and a lot of people think he's going, well, I don't know anymore. A lot of people predicted he would be the Big 12 Player of the Year. And last night certainly wasn't on Hunter Dickinson, but I'm going to say this, and it's not a slight on either BYU or Utah. I'm not taking anything away from a great win for the Utes at the Huntsman Center in front of a fun crowd, and any win right now for the Utes as they're heading down the stretch in conference play prior to the conference tournament. Any win is a good win, and certainly a win at the time over the number 17 team in the country and the bluest of blue bloods in the Big 12, Kansas, followed by the win over K-State. The Utes deserve a lot of credit for wins against two really good teams. On the road at UCF coming up, and then it's at Arizona, home against ASU and West Virginia, and then down in Provo to finish it off against BYU on March the 8th. And if Utah can grab 3 wins in their final 5 games, that is a 10-win Big 12 team, and that is a great accomplishment. It really should give Craig some potential attention for maybe, in the mix for Coach of the Year after Utah was picked to finish last in the conference. If they can win 10 games in conference play, that would be a great accomplishment, and it would also put them at 18 wins on the season. So, good solid year. I don't know that the NCAA tournament is in Utah's future this year unless they do something wild and crazy at the Big 12 tournament. But on the BYU side of things, this ultimately last night was a game that caught the attention of the country for a few different reasons. NBA All-Star break. It finished last night. The NBA's back tonight, but last night there was no basketball on. Last night there was no NBA basketball on. And maybe you're into watching pro golfers hit a ball on a simulator. I can't do it. As much as I love golf, it's not interesting to me. And after the game, Scott Van Pelt, SVP on his Sports Center, which is the only watchable Sports Center anymore. Sorry, Stan Verrett or whoever else is on the dais these days. But BYU Kansas ends. Van Pelt leads his show with his best thing I saw, which he always does. And then he brings in Kevin Young live at the Marriott Center down in Provo to lead his show as the first interview. Van Pelt gets a ton of eyes, man. Like, he's the one show on that network that I find digestible and a lot of people still love to watch. And, last year, BYU actually beat Kansas at Fog Allen. And after the game, it was kind of similar. Mark Pope goes on SVP because if you're going to do something in Big 12 play, notably, do it against Kansas. That's how you're going to get everybody's attention. Like I said, the winningest program in the history of college basketball, the bluest of blue bloods in this conference. And if BYU won by 1 point in triple overtime last night, it would have caught a lot of people's attention. The fact that they nearly had Kansas down by 40 and won by 34, and honestly, it wasn't that close, has the college basketball world talking today in a way that doesn't usually happen with games out here. And as much as it is to do with BYU and their quality of play, a lot of it has to do with the fact that everybody's going, what the hell happened to Kansas? Because BYU last night essentially knocked down practice shots all game long. I was stunned at how much space BYU's players had to shoot the basketball. Now, Richie made some tough shots. I think Richie might be their best player. Richie Saunders might be BYU's best player. But Trevin Knell does one thing. And if you're Bill Self, you tell your players, like, hey, 21 on the other side, all you have to do is make him dribble it twice, and he will pee down his leg. Just do not let him catch and shoot it in space, and we're fine. Guess what they did? They treated Trevin Knell like he was Traore from the outside. He had acres of space just to catch and shoot rhythm set shot threes, and that's what he is elite at. That's why he is a 1,000-point scorer at Brigham Young. That's why he is in the top 5 of three-point shots made. But watch BYU, watch Trevin when they ask him to dribble it. He panics and passes it to either Dallin Hall or Jaeger Demon. He has no desire to be a playmaker because it's not in his skill set at the collegiate level. He is one thing and one thing only, and he's elite at that, and that is a knockdown spot-up shooter. Your job as a defender, playing defense against BYU, is to know your personnel and know you can't leave that dude wide open all night. Like I said, Richie made some tough shots, but most of his threes were wide open. Mawat Mag, who, by the way, they're, I think, 8-1 since Kevin decided to start him, something like that. He was 3 of 4. Everybody came off the bench, knocked down shots. It was a dominant, overwhelming performance from BYU down in Provo. And Kansas leaves the state of Utah suffering 2 L's and never leading for 1 second against either Utah or BYU. It was the largest loss in the history of college basketball by a former AP preseason number 1 team. No preseason number 1 team in AP history has lost a game by more than 33 points, and BYU got Kansas by 34. Bill Self has been coaching at Kansas for 22 years. This tied for the largest loss in the history of the Bill Self tenure at Kansas. And I could keep going. I mean, it's the 3rd largest loss in the history of that program that's been around since 1898 or whatever. And it is wild to see the team that everybody picked to win the Big 12 and the AP had as the number 1 team preseason go down to Provo and get dog walked. It was humiliating for them. And if you're a BYU fan, certainly a good night because, like I said, after the game, Van Pelt opens up his sports center, does the opener, and boom, Kevin Young on Scott Van Pelt's show. And BYU is now playing themselves into a situation where they are very, very safe when it comes to the NCAA tournament bubble watch, and they look to be a lock at this point. Now, they've got some work to do because at this point they are 31 in the net. And on Selection Sunday, if you don't win your conference, you really want to be in the 20s in the net. Then you'll feel safe. I don't think there's any way BYU misses the NCAA tournament at this point. And it looks like they have the clearest path to the number 5 seed for the conference tournament. Houston is the class of this league. There's no doubt. Arizona, probably the second best team. Iowa State's kind of come back around after a rough stretch. And Texas Tech is probably the surprise that nobody saw coming. But then it's BYU. They're ahead of Kansas. They're ahead of Baylor. And they have the tiebreaker against both those two teams. So we'll see what happens down the stretch. If Utah can get 3 of their final 5 games, they will win 10 games in conference, which is a great accomplishment. And if BYU can get 3 of their final 5, they'll win 12 conference games year 2. Finally, BYU 2-0 against Kansas in the Big 12 in basketball, 0-2 against Kansas in the Big 12 in football, which is just weird. All right, we'll get back to this game, but coming up on the other side, the second half of the NBA season gets rolling tonight. Zach Harper stops by for your NBA Daily Assist on a Wednesday afternoon, so keep it right here on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM, proud to be part of Utah's ESPN radio network. I've got a new goal in 2025, and that's just to say yes to more things and just find joy in things that bring joy to others. So I don't care anymore that you guys like Pitbull and I don't. I'm just going to embrace the bit and welcome in Zach Harper on a Wednesday afternoon. I'm over it, man. You win. I give up.
Here's the thing, is with that song, you have no choice but to give up because that is a banger. That's an all-time banger.
All right. Okay. Like I said, if it brings you joy, it brings me joy, Zach. That's my new goal for 2025. Where do we find you today? It sounds like you might be on a sailboat somewhere.
Oh, God. I'm in Los Angeles trying to find a parking spot anywhere in the city, and it's just,
Yeah.
It's what everyone wants to hear, L.A. traffic, but, yeah, it's terrible.
Look, I never knew how real it was until I spent a year working there, and I'm like, screw this. I'm like, it's enough to make me not ever want to live there, and then you land and it's 75 degrees, and you're like, maybe I'll deal with it.
Yeah, it's like it's kind of overcast a little bit. It's 76. We're in the middle of February, late February, I guess. I don't know what the cutoff is there. And so there are worse places to be. But if you I made the mistake of going out at 1:30. That's on me.
All right, philosophical question for you, Zach, right off the top. Are you ready?
Yeah.
So, at some point, the asteroid's going to hit, and we're cooked. Okay, it's just going to happen, and you have talked about it before. And ultimately, what we've learned now, according to scientists that are smarter than you and I, the asteroid YR4 has risen to a record level to hit the Earth in 2032. Here is my question to you. Do you want to know when it's coming? If you had the opportunity, if whoever's in charge, whoever is really behind the Wizard of Oz controls, whoever's in charge of this whole thing, hit you up, was like, Zach, I can tell you the day this is happening if you'd like to know and nobody else will know. Or you just blissfully live your life until you don't anymore. Which avenue would you take?
That's a great question because, at this point, do I have knowledge that this might happen in 2032?
You do not.
It's going to happen it's going to happen in your lifetime, but you don't know when.
Correct. Yes.
Man, I think I've kind of got to know. I'd like to think I'm a bigger person. No, I just live my life and every day is the best. I think I got to know.
See, this is, for listeners, it's a peek behind the curtain. I'm a weirdo. I sat up and thought about this for 30 minutes last night. When I read the article, I'm like, would I want to know, or would I just rather live my life until I wouldn't know? And the thought, Zach, of what you could accomplish the last day, revenge-wise, on people who have wronged you over the years is enough to be like, I got to know, man. Because the last day before the world ends, can you imagine how many boxes you could check on your list?
I would be an absolute menace.
Oh, yes.
I wouldn't use this for I'm going to I'm going to make all the wrongs right and everything. No, this would be revenge week leading up and be like, wow, you're really kind of crashing out here, which I think is a term kids are still saying. You're kind of crashing out here. And I said, just you wait. Mm-hmm. I know what I'm doing.
Yep. No, I'm 100% with you. I was debating, and then when I realized what I could do the final day before the world ended, I'm like, I'm on board. I want to know.
Yeah.
All right.
Well,
good.
Real quick, let me add to that. You know what? I would feel like Magic Johnson when he had quit, and only the media knew. The Lakers didn't know. What an incredible feeling where he has this whole thing of they're talking about free agents in the summer, and I'm just thinking I'm not going to be here. People would be like, oh yeah, we're going to San Tropez next summer and everything, and I would just think you're not.
Yep.
I promise you're not.
Keep up with those plans. Hopefully it makes you happy. Yeah. I thought you'd be a good one to ask that question, and maybe we'll get back to it at some point. But here's where I'll pivot now. How much of the All-Star Weekend did you consume? I don't know if you went. I don't know if you were watching. How much of it did you consume?
I didn't watch the celebrity game because I don't hate myself, and then I watched the second half of the Rising Stars games because I kind of forgot they were on. So I caught the second half of the second game and then the entirety of the championship game or whatever I guess it's called. Watched all of Saturday night. Watched all of Sunday. It was fine, which I guess is an upgrade over last year. But it was fine.
Yeah, I guess it was fine if you enjoy the weekend. And so ultimately, because you and I are members of the media who cover the NBA, we are obligated to do the topic, how do we fix this thing? Right? And when anybody asks me what's your preferred format, I say, well, it's the All-Star game comprised of players who care about playing. That's my preferred format. What we saw for like 30 or 40 years that for the most part was very awesome. Now, I'm not a revisionist historian. Not every game was great up and down the entire time when I was growing up watching in the 90s, but more often than not, it was the greatest pickup game in the world because the greatest players in the world showed up and more often than not tried to play. So my preferred format is the All-Star game, comprised of two teams with the best players in the world that care about playing. But I think, Zach, I'm resigned to the fact now there's no format that will motivate these guys to care. So I don't really know what you do.
Yeah, I mean, it's just there's they make so much money, and I'm not using that as a complaint. I'm just like that's just a fact of life, right? Like you get to a certain point, and these things, regardless of like your job or whatever, like there's certain things that just become less and less meaningful. And I've heard some players, try to explain the reason the competitiveness isn't there, and it's some valid reasons, like you're supposed to be about making sure you're okay for the second half of the season, and so if I get injured there, blah blah blah. Like I get all that, and we had something. Joe Varden published something for us today. I think it was today, either today or yesterday. It was a player poll from people who participate in All-Star Weekend. I think Darius Garland. I don't know if it was tongue in cheek, but his suggestion for making players care was like $1 million per player. I guess if you win or maybe if you play, I don't know what it was, but like it just said $1 million per player would get it. I'm like, I don't know, man. Like you kind of already make a lot of money, and that seems like a gross way of doing it. But if that's what it takes and it's worth it, and the league has it, sure. I guess, ultimately, it's on the players. Draymond complaining and whining the other night, and I'm not anti-Draymond, but I'm anti-Draymond when he tries to, pretend he's inventing an idea, and it's just stuff that's been thrown around. Like, I get it. Like, Rising Stars on Sunday is not hallowed sacred ground. Well, you guys shouldn't have messed around for the last 8 years with All-Star games, and then maybe you wouldn't be in this position. And ultimately, I think it's going to be on the players. I think maybe someone like Wemby, Wemby seemed to take it pretty seriously, and not one guy can change it, but I've heard stories in the past from guys like Dwayne Wade who are like, yeah, Kobe set the tone for a lot of those All-Star games. And I think that, it matters. It matters when the good players decide to care and decide to set the tone and almost shame. I'm into shaming. I'm into bullying. I don't know how you bully someone who makes $200 million, but there are ways to shame them into it. And I guess throwing Rising Stars into the mix on a Sunday, you don't want that, then you better bring it next year.
Yeah, well said. I mean, it is on any player who's complaining about, hey, the sanctity of being able to earn your way to play on Sunday. Well, yeah, you guys had the chance, and you didn't deliver the performance. And look, ultimately, I understand that when I complain about what I perceive to be a problem for the league, they always just talk about the amount of eyes and attention and the international revenue streams that they generate will completely offset any compromised domestic revenue streams due to lack of interest. And I get it. I understand. But ultimately, it really is, I think, something you take away from basketball fans and something that you have kind of tried to put on that's only harming the consumer of somebody that tries to watch this thing that once upon a time was really good. Now, we're probably never going back to what it was once upon a time. Maybe it is just one of those things that generationally has changed, and now it's just time to accept it for what it is. Now, Giannis came out with the whole European or international players versus domestic players. We've done that before, but there was also a mention of maybe playing this game overseas. But I land on the same issue. I don't care where you play it, whether it's Salt Lake 2 years ago, the Bay Area this year, or Paris in 2 years. I just don't know that any sort of format or any sort of matchup is going to make the majority of these guys show up and play hard. It just, I don't know that it exists, man. I really don't.
Yeah, I mean, remember the first year of the Elam ending where you had to hit a certain marker after the fourth quarter? That was a great All-Star game, and everyone was like, it got fixed. They figured it out. And then a year later, maybe 2 years later, it sucked again, right? The toothpaste is out of the tube, and I don't know how you get it back in there. And I think it's you can make all these tweaks, you can make all these changes. I think USA versus the world would be great for a year or two, and then it would kind of go back to, my hamstring's a little tight. I'm not going all out. I'm not rotating over. I'm not jeopardizing this and jeopardizing that. It's just a culture thing. It's a culture thing, and the culture in the NBA when it comes to this stuff is I'm gonna try. I'm gonna give my my best effort for the things that matter the most, and an exhibition game just doesn't matter. As much as it's supposed to be a celebration, I mean, man, we went from years of, the league is in good hands, the league's in good hands after every All-Star game, to now this conversation every year. And it sucks. Like, it's annoying, but that's just what it is. And I don't think there's a way to outright fix it. You can tweak it and improve here and there, but it's human nature. Like, regression's going to happen.
Okay, excuse me. So the LeBron portion of this, and I'm not a LeBron hater at all. I mean, if anything, I've always been a guy that's like, I'm stunned that this dude lived up to everything that we placed on him when he was 17 years old and then some. I mean, I am in awe of this career and always will be. And there's a period at the end of that sentence no matter what. But to show up and not really tell anybody that you're not going to play initially, and then as the players are being introduced and you're the last guy they introduce, it's just this grandiose, self-absorbed approach, and you're in street clothes and everyone's like, wait, what? Because look, man, the fact of the matter is, and I've never been like, even back in the day when players played hard in the All-Star game and they cared about the acknowledgement, I was never a fan of putting clauses in contracts that activate bonuses if you make the team. And I'm not a huge fan of clauses in player contracts that activate bonuses if you win postseason awards, because the process at times can be so arbitrary. But LeBron actually, in my opinion, made a very selfish move over the weekend to not if you're not going to play, speak up, because then a replacement will step in for you, and then that activates a clause in that player's contract to get a little cash. Like, he took money out of somebody's pocket by just wanting to have this moment be about him, as opposed to being just I honestly don't know how his peers feel about him. I really don't, because I think there are two sides of the coin, right? I think there are probably plenty of players that appreciate the path that he paved for simply more player empowerment, and that's not necessarily even a bad thing. But then there's the over-exaggeration of his own story, the outright lies that are very easy to pull receipts up for. And if I'm like, Porter brought up the name Norman Powell, if I'm one of the players that was on the outside looking in and realizing that I had a chance to be an all-star and make a little cash, and I'm watching that, I'm probably pretty upset, man. So give me your thoughts.
Well, I'm with you. Like, I think all that is fair if that's the case. Now, our friend Amin El Hassan had a theory today on the podcast Basketball Illuminati. Maybe it was a quiet protest. Maybe it was a quiet protest of rising stars being allowed to play on the Sunday game. And I don't know if I completely buy that theory, but I'm interested, because when you think about it, all right, he doesn't tell anybody. He just goes out there. He doesn't even dress. He just wears his normal clothes and everything, does the photo ops, doesn't even dress for the photo ops and everything. And then multiple times in the weekend, multiple times in the broadcast, Draymond Green, his friend, a clutch athlete, starts openly saying how trash this is, that rising stars get to play on this day. LeBron doesn't have to be the bad guy in that sense. But if that's the case, if that theory holds any weight, holds any water, I'm very intrigued by it. I don't know if I believe it. I've been processing it since I heard it this morning, but I'm not outright rejecting it as a possibility.
All right. I'll have to digest that. And look, I've been
thinking about it all day.
Yeah.
And how to write it. Yeah.
Amin's my guy. Tom's my guy. At times I listen to that podcast. I'm like, how much ayahuasca did you do this morning prior to the record? Because they go into places. And look, it's why it's a good product, because they do think outside of the box. Yeah, man, I don't know. Let me just follow up with this, since I alluded to it. How do you think, like, if you had a room full of the majority of the league and they had to tell the truth, how do you think his peers view him? How do you think the other players in the league view LeBron James?
It's a great question, because you do have, you have so many different eras of people who are like, hey, MJ's the greatest, right? Or, hey, Kobe's actually the greatest. Why isn't he considered for this? I saw an older video, but it was Allen Iverson recently enough talking about, I can't believe Kobe gets, skipped over for these conversations. And he's like, no disrespect to LeBron, but, Kobe was the next guy. And then you get to look, it's Brandon Miller, but there are players in the league that are like, hey, Paul George is the guy, right? I'm like, that's crazy. Like, what a crazy jump there to be like, hey, who the best player is to me? It's Paul George. Ant's favorite player, I don't think he'd say the best, but his favorite player is Kevin Durant. I don't know how many current players look at LeBron that way. I think they appreciate the longevity. I think they, especially once they've been in this for a few years, to recognize that we're on year 22. He's still this good. He's got all these check marks on his resume. To your point, like, he had the most insane expectations for everything, and he exceeded them. Like, he's flat out exceeded them. He hasn't really had, like, his biggest scandal is that he signed with a team on television in 2010, right? Like, that's the biggest thing that people really, like, can hold against him still, I guess. But I don't know that he holds, across the league in a way that MJ did or a way that Kobe did for a while. Because even Kobe was getting that as Shaq was still an MVP and a great player, and people were still like, Kobe's kind of the guy. I don't know how many players would be like. I think they're appreciative of the player empowerment. I think they're appreciative of how this stuff has gone, but maybe it was always going to go that way, and he was just the person to do it rather than he's the reason. If that makes sense.
It does. And my best guess is most players would land on, ultimate respect with a side of eye roll, right, from time to time.
Right.
Where you're like, dude, come on. Like, you've already proven it's in a way, and I was at the Hall of Fame induction ceremony when Michael Jordan gave his famous speech when he just eviscerated everybody. Yeah. And everybody there was like, Mike, like, we know that none of those people could guard you. Like, we watched the whole thing. Like, why are you reminding us, right? And I kind of
that's why he's the greatest to me.
Oh, no, look.
Holding that.
It was, and that's probably one of the things that he used every single night to motivate to play at the top of his game. But I think in a different way, I feel the same about a lot of the LeBron stuff, where he's not as outwardly like, I want to kill you and slash your throat, but like the comments about having a high basketball IQ and the comments about, like, you don't understand what it is to play on the level that I do. And, like, it's the same thing. I'm like, I know, man. I watch you. It's amazing. Right, yeah. You don't have to remind us how great you are because we can see it. Like, that's the stuff with him that kind of falls on deaf ears for me.
Yeah, I mean, I'll push back on one thing. I love the line. The line that we can, like, outright prove immediately to be wrong, I think is such a bold move by him and such a funny move and such a funny part of his legacy is that he will just outright say stuff that isn't true. And we're like, hold on a second. Like, no, none of that. Like, we've got receipts here, as you said. Like, we got these receipts. Like, I don't know. And he just kind of, like, just tries stuff with that in terms of narratives. His whole, like, I'm not even a scorer. It's like you've averaged 24 points a game since you were in the NBA. Like, I think the lowest he's ever averaged is like 22 or something like that, right? Like no, you're a scorer. Like, I get you were supposed to be Magic Johnson, but you averaged like 27 a game for your career. Like that, like you're a scorer. No one says you're not a scorer. And so his control of the narrative can get tiresome at times, but I do ultimately think, like, when you're trying to live up to Michael Jordan, right? Like he's mentioned before, he's chasing that ghost. When you're trying to live up for that and you can't, in terms of like the ways that Mike was accepted versus the ways that LeBron is judged, it was always going to be this crazy uphill battle. But when you can't match that, when you have lost in the finals, right, you do kind of have to pivot a little bit. And I guess I understand that attempt by him to rise above that standard with focusing on the other stuff. But ultimately I just find it funny, but I can't take anything seriously. So, that's me.
Well, yeah. I mean, the entertainment value is through the roof. There have been more than a few times where I'm watching him in real time say something. I'm like, dude, what? That's like not even close.
Spence, even just walking into an arena on page 1 of a book,
right,
is so funny.
Yeah, right.
It's so funny.
Yeah. No, and I always wonder how other players digest it because it seems so fake and so corny for a guy that's so awesome at so many things that he does. But one more thing here, because have you ever done anything with it's Van Lathan? Have you ever worked with him at all?
I have, yeah.
I like him. I don't know him, but whenever he's on a pod, I try to catch it because I like his insight. And I had forgotten this story, so I wanted to see if you had any insight to it, where LeBron, in his 3rd or 4th year in the league, thereabouts, had a camp during the summer where high school players showed up, and they were in a run, and Jordan Crawford dunked on him. And according to Van Lathan, right after that dunk, he stopped the game and went over to everybody who had a phone and said, kill that video. I don't want that going online anywhere. And, I had heard that, but I had forgotten about it. And when I listened to Van Lathan unpack that yesterday, I was like, dude, that is kind of like a anecdote that might be a microcosm of exactly why we are where we are with some of this stuff, because players are so terrified to have one clip go viral and then exist on the internet forever. And Jordan Crawford was a good player. I mean, he played pro basketball. So do you have any insight into how that went down, and what does that kind of snapshot say to you?
Yeah, I don't I definitely remember that, and I remember the rumors, and then the footage got out at some point.
It did, yes.
Deadspin had it, and it's not even it's not like Anthony Edwards on John Collins. It's he dunked on him, but it wasn't this biblical thing. And so it's funny to me because I do think there is a real level of insecurity with LeBron, whereas I think Kobe was insecure in how he was trying to catch Mike. I think Mike was just, and I've said this lovingly, like a psychopath, right? That even in the Last Dance documentary, there's a point where he's in a hotel room and he's like, no one would want this life. And you're like, that's crazy. You're the highest paid player. You're the most popular. And he's like, this is miserable, right? He's just outright, this is miserable, but he has to do it this way. And trying to replicate that when that's the standard, I think leads to a lot of insecurity in a game where you are harshly judged. And so I think any little bit as you're growing up, more and more in an internet era where, Mike didn't have to deal with that. Kobe early on didn't have to deal with that. LeBron, he's just old enough to to be kind of aware of that stuff, at a young enough age. And I remember it not as him stopping the practice or stopping the run and everyone's got to destroy it. I remember that as Nike officials went, and this is probably at the behest of LeBron if this is true, but Nike officials went and took all the footage they could get and to eliminate that, right? And so I don't know if that's a team thing controlling the narrative, but he is so worried about his narrative and being misjudged or underappreciated. And it's man, we appreciate you. It's just eventually you move on to the next era.
Right. It's like the kid in school who tried the hardest to be cool is the one that was least cool. It's you either are or you aren't, stop trying so hard. Would you trade a life that is thought to be miserable in exchange for being Michael Jordan? Or I should say, would you agree to a life that is thought to be miserable if that meant you could be Michael Jordan?
I have a lot of irrational confidence in my life. I can't imagine being able to back it up that way. That would be that's a level of power that I don't. I mean, I of course I would that. My answer is ultimately yes, but I think it's way more complicated than people think.
And I also do not trust myself with that type of ability. I mean, I would score 20 in a high school game and almost get shot in a venue because I just couldn't stop talking to the other players or the other crowd. So if I was the best player in the world, I probably would be murdered, if I'm honest.
Here's the thing. I don't think you could be that type of player, that type of person. I don't think you could be that today. As much as it's sort of revered, that level of and again, I don't say this as a disparaging remark. I think it's ultimately a positive for his career, but that level of competitive psychosis, I don't think that would be accepted today, as a culture.
Yeah, you're probably right. I would, and I guess it's a good point to bring up because in fairness to LeBron, I wonder what the Michael Jordan narrative would be if everywhere he went, there were cameras following him, man, because I know some of the sausage that was made behind the scenes. I certainly don't know all of it. And
I'm sure it's rough.
Oh, if we knew all the details about Michael Jordan, and I mean all the details about Michael Jordan when he wasn't playing basketball, there's no way he's remembered the way he is today. So in fairness to LeBron, our guy was raised under a microscope the way that Mike wasn't.
Yeah, absolutely. He was. And I think, man, you have any kind of eyes on it. It's the whole thing of, you might feel like you're wearing something that doesn't fit right or looks stupid, and you're in your mind, you're in a grocery store and you're everyone is staring at me, everyone is judging me, everyone's looking at me, and in reality, no one cares. Maybe one person cares, right? So to have that about your professional life that you've essentially sacrificed to childhood and an adulthood on some level in order to become the best at it, or maximize whatever potential you had to do all that, and then it's still scrutinized. Like, I always think about this of like, think about how historically good Chris Paul is at basketball, right? And how easily dismissed he is. That's got to be maddening.
Yeah. And a lot of the criticisms are fair. I've always been a Chris Paul guy, but your point is well taken. All right, man, good stuff today. And I'm glad we agree on. And I'm going to have this asteroid topic with the rest of my guests because I could not stop thinking about it last night. But yes, the thought of what you could do the final couple of days before everything ends is just it's too intoxicating. I'm not going to lie.
If you remember, let's revisit it again next week because I really want to think about this and like what that would entail for me.
Fair enough. We'll do that, buddy. Have a good week. We'll chat soon.
Yes, sir. Thanks, Vince.
All right, Zach Harper from The Athletic also hosts the Cinephobe podcast. He's got a podcast called Count the Dings. He does work on SiriusXM. He's a busy boy. At Talk Hoops is where you find him on social media. Brought to you today by our good friends at Burt Brothers with over 30 years of experience in nearly 30 locations. Burt Brothers ASE certified technicians bring expertise and professionalism to every interaction. Industry-leading warranties and low-price tire guarantees. One-stop shop for reliable repairs and maintenance. From tires and alignments to fluids and brakes, offering a full range of automotive services tailored to meet your needs. Now offering value tire options such as Americas and Summit tires, starting at just $69 with warranties that go up to 70,000 miles. As one of the few AAA certified shops in Utah, Burt Brothers upholds the highest standards in automotive service. Stop by Burt Brothers or Tire Busters locations or schedule an appointment today to experience the trusted service that has made them a Utah favorite for over 3 decades. Burt Brothers, doing it better since day one. More information online at burtbrothers.com. CK, live in studio, coming up next right here on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Proud to be part of Utah's ESPN radio network. All right, typically a Friday staple on the program, but Chris Camerani live in studio stops by on this Wednesday afternoon for the 3 o'clock hour. So you did watch Can't Hardly Wait recently, didn't you? Because this track is on that soundtrack, I believe.
I think Graduate is on Can't Hardly Wait, a different Third Eye Blind hit, but I mean, they're all bangers, Spence.
So we were talking about this during the break. Porter yesterday asked a question on air that honestly blew my mind a little bit. So shout out to him. Because I randomly, the algorithm on Spotify was like, you're in the mood to listen to Interstate Love Song by Stone Temple Pilots today. Boom, here you go. And I probably haven't heard that song in 5 or 6 years. And I was like, oh, I like this song. This is a good song. STP, fine, not great.
Yeah.
So I did the Spotify. I know you and Will Hardy, Apple Music.
Apple Music guys, yep.
I did the Spotify thing where you can pull up the song and then just go to the radio station that will play other songs like that one. Then the algorithm tells you what you like. And it was littered with 90s one-hit wonders. There was a ton of Pearl Jam. There was Nirvana, STP, and a little bit of Third Eye Blind as well. And so when Porter brought that up, like, how has this music aged? I honestly don't know the answer because I don't know how many youngs are, like, rocking REM these days.
That's a good point. I would say that the 90s are probably overlooked in terms of what are conceived to be oldies now. I would imagine the youngs have their fair share of 80s music for the Michael Jacksons, all that stuff, probably the 70s as well. I don't know. That's a great question. I know that some youngs, like my youngest sister-in-law, loves 90s hip-hop and R&B.
How old is she, can I ask?
23.
23, okay.
Yeah. So that resonates. But, like, if we're talking about, going to a coffee shop in the Avenues, I don't know if one of the baristas there is, like, crushing B-sides of Third Eye Blind or, Depeche Mode.
Cafe on First.
Hey.
Excellent spot.
Great spot.
Great breakfast burrito.
Yeah.
They can work on the wrapping of the burrito. I'm just going to say that. If you get, like, the extra cream cheese and stuff.
They're not our sponsors today.
They're not. But, no, it was actually making me think, and I'm a little bit older than you, but you appreciate the 90s. First of all, 90s hip-hop is by far the best decade. It's not even close. And if there is another close decade, it's actually probably the 80s, not moving forward. So I'm glad to hear your sister-in-law appreciates it. Mm-hmm. But you're a fan of the 90s, even though you're a older millennial. The best decade.
Best decade.
What did you say off air? Everything was great?
Everything was good.
Love it.
I mean, listen, I listened to the Rewatchables podcast. Bill Simmons, Kyle Brandt did Wayne's World.
Oh, nice.
And that is, a top 5 movie for me all time. And Kyle Brandt of the NFL Network is, a famous on-camera face. And he told a story how he got to interview the stars of Bohemian Rhapsody, the movie starring Rami Malek. Like, for some reason, they went on NFL Network when the movie was coming out. And he asked them what their relationship was to, like, that song. And they were like, oh, we all learned of it from Wayne's World, just like I did. And I know that's a song from the 80s, and Wayne's World is a movie from the 90s. But, yeah, man. I mean, I'm on a tangent here, but watch Wayne's World. It still hits. To me, it's the most quotable movie of all time.
It's got to be up there. I want the CK Tangents all hour, man. And by the way, the most Gen X thing I'll say on the show today, Kyle Brandt, for me, is Kyle Brandt from the real world Chicago, not from the NFL Network.
Okay.
Kyle Brandt was on the Real World like 20 years ago.
And he was a soap opera guy.
He was.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yep.
But no, I mean, did you watch the Real World back in the day?
Yeah. I watched Real World Seattle, San Francisco.
Seattle was good.
I was always a Real World guy over Road Rules. I wasn't a Road Rules guy.
Road Rules came later.
Yeah. And then they did like a Real World versus Road Rules type thing. I mean, for MTV used to be really cool, guys.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I'm telling you, it was, I would get home from school and I would go watch Total Request Live, TRL, Carson Daly, 3:30 p.m.
Absolutely.
And, you wanted to see what was going to be the top video of the day. And so often it was, your Poppy, NSYNC's, Christina Aguilera's, but every once in a while you had a curveball in there. You had a Blink-182 or a Green Day or something. And it was a vibe, as the kids say, back in the day.
MTV, for a number of years, ruled. And it's our generation. The generation now, first of all, they don't watch, anything outside of YouTube or their phones. Yeah. But, TRL. And I got to say, Real World Road Rules Challenge, I loved it.
Yeah, the
first
challenge
5 or
was
6.
great. Yeah. VH1 behind the music.
Nice.
Like,
bring that back.
For real though.
Yes.
Like that was almost like 60 minutes like for musical like talent.
Yep.
Very fascinating stuff.
Yep.
I would love them to, I know different channel, but like stuff like that we need more of now.
I totally agree. There's not a lot of that out there. And maybe there's some on YouTube that I haven't discovered yet because I need to maybe
might as well just go back and rewatch stuff because
Yeah.
we're so inundated with information that I'm sure we've forgotten a billion things that we once knew.
no doubt. But 90s, okay, we're on
Yeah.
the same page.
Yeah.
Things have aged well, movies, music, and such. YouTube television is where we're able to watch the lads today. Let's do a little bit on the lads, CK.
No, on YouTube, not YouTube TV. It is
Oh.
streaming on YouTube, but it's not on YouTube TV.
So RSL CONCACAF Champions Cup in about 1 hour, 20 minutes, streaming on YouTube.
And you can watch it on Tubi, which is a free app.
Oh, okay.
But there's other CONCACAF games on tonight. So Messi's playing, so they get the main draw.
I see.
I think Seattle's in Honduras or Guatemala. There's a bunch of matches tonight. I know last night you were grinding tape on Rapids LAFC, but tonight when the star is front and center, everybody else is secondary.
Yeah, and look, there's no debate. I mean, obviously, I've talked about this before. When you have a signing like Lionel Messi, I mean, I draw the parallel to Beckham, even though worldwide there's really no comparison. I mean, hell, Trey came on the show and compared him to Jesus. Okay, so that's where we're at with the Messi stuff.
To some people,
right?
He literally is.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't think, and I'll only speak for myself. I've been overseas and attended games in the EPL, and when you do that, you open yourself up to an entire new world on a number of different reasons. First of all, you say, oh, soccer can look like that. All due respect to MLS, 30 years old, a dumb, weird league, and
only getting dumber.
Yes,
in some areas,
quality of play improving certainly, but a league that is just dumb in so many.
It's in its own way.
It is, and the quality improving. But when you actually see what it looks like in the Premiership, and I've never been to like Bundesliga or La Liga or whatever, but I've seen it on television. You realize that soccer can look like that, and that's why it is the world's game. But you also realize that I don't think many of us in this country have an accurate idea of just how big this game is and how massively popular these players are when you actually leave our borders. I'm not sure that we really have proper context.
Yeah, I mean, the easiest comp would be our American football because that runs the show in this country and probably will forever. But, yeah, I mean, it's still insane to me. I think Miami's playing another MLS team in CONCACAF tonight, but, like, it's still hilarious that Messi brought his buddies to Miami and brought another great Argentine who he played with at Barcelona to be their head coach too. So it's like it's Messi's show in MLS, and you're right. Like the star power that he wields is, I mean, LeBron, Kobe, Michael. Those are the guys. I mean, who is the most famous American football player? Is it Brady?
I'm sure. Well, yeah, it's probably still Tom Brady.
Yeah, but like
currently active.
No, I'm saying like in our lifetime.
Yeah, it's probably Brady.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Lamar.
But if Tom Brady goes to Peru, or if he goes to Gabon, or if he goes to Sri Lanka, nobody's freaking out if they see him walking on the streets.
Right. In the NFL, there are rumors that they're going to try to expand internationally, Mexico City and Europe and such. I don't like why. It's never been embraced overseas. I think it's a very uniquely American.
Cash grab.
Yeah,
just like everything else.
But they don't need it, man.
No, they don't.
Like the NFL doesn't. The NBA very much needs international revenue streams to kind of offset the domestic apathy.
That's a great word.
Right? To the
Great
product
ball.
during the regular season where players just don't really seem to care at all. Did you watch 1 second of All-Star Weekend?
I did not.
Have you ever?
Oh, yeah.
So
yeah,
you were a
back in the day when I was single and sad and didn't have much of a life. I would, fire up a, Kraft mac and cheese and watch the dunk contest.
A 99-cent Totino pizza?
Pizza, yeah. Or during my super sad days, I would go to Cafe Rio and get a giant 2,000-calorie salad and, watch a dunk contest. But it hasn't been, I mean, it's ironic that they had it in San Francisco, which is the last time I thought the dunk contest was worth a damn 25 years ago when I was like 15 years old.
And that dunk contest was something else, man.
Yeah. And I mean, and now it's all gimmicks and, it's fine. We don't need to go over NBA All-Star
hot takes by CK today.
No, I am honestly wondering, as somebody who makes his living in the world of sports, if it even resonated with you. I should turn this on.
Not even a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, is it shallow to say that if there were star talent in the dunk contest that I would probably tune in?
No, I mean, look.
That to me is more intriguing than the game.
Well, and it's one of the things that's changed, and I hate to put all of this on LeBron. It sounds like I am. And Mac McClung is a tremendously talented dunker, but he's a G League player that most people have never heard of, and he looks like your little brother's friend that came over to try to steal your Uncrustables. He just looks like a dude. But LeBron, I think, was because Kobe won the dunk contest. He may have won it twice.
He was really young, though, right? It was before he got famous.
Well, sure, but he did win it twice, and I do think the second time he won it, he was kind of evolving into one of the better players in the league. I think the first time he was in it, he was a rookie, to your point, the same rookie that airballed like 5 threes here in Salt Lake. But, I mean, when LeBron kind of burst on the scene, I can remember when, people who covered the league were talking about it. It was almost like this rite of passage. Mike did it. Kobe did it, and now it's LeBron's turn because he's dunking on people, so he has to be able to dunk in a dunk contest really well. He never had any interest. He never even wanted
LeBron's
to try
too
it.
Smart, man. He was never going to open himself up to potentially lose on that stage, and they probably wouldn't have let him lose.
Yeah, is that smart, though, or is it weak?
I mean,
go
it depends.
Compete, man.
It's a dunk contest. I agree with you. I'm just telling you through the lens of how the current modern player thinks, and everybody blames LeBron. At the end of the day, everything's about money. How are you going to be the most marketable to brands? Don't put yourself in any sort of precarious position, publicly, privately, even on something as, inconsequential as a dunk contest. That's the way most professional players are, especially in the NBA.
And it's the way they are now, and I just need to stop being like, hey, it used to be different. And the reason why I continue to bring this up topically, it's different than the Pro Bowl, because I've had a few guests like, hey, well, what about the Pro Bowl? Nobody watches the Pro Bowl. Here's the difference. The Pro Bowl has never been good. It was never good. It was never competitive. The All-Star game for like 30 years was the best pickup basketball game in the world because the best players showed up, and they played hard, and they tried to win. And so when you juxtapose the two products now, maybe it's just a selfish thing that I missed this game that I used to love. And now, because I turned it on, I watched it, and it was it wasn't just the format and the games that were frustrating. It was the television presentation. We got 30 minutes of Kevin Hart making fun of Shaq's turtleneck. What am I watching?
Yeah.
And if you're a player, Chris, and you play a game, and you play hard for about 15 minutes to try to win, and then they come over to the side and they say, hey, okay, you're going to have to sit here now for 20 or 30 minutes while Kevin Hart does stand-up. They interviewed Jokic, and they're like, hey, what'd you do during the break? He's like, I got tight.
That's how you get hurt.
Exactly.
Yeah. I don't know how people didn't think that through.
Yeah.
That is the quintessential, if you're going to play. Otherwise, do not do that because the chances of you getting a muscle pull or a tweak or something are so much higher if you play for 15 or 20 minutes than have to sit for an hour and a half and then play again.
100%. And any pickup soccer player knows this. You don't have to be a high-level athlete. Kevin Hart, funny, yes or no?
Kevin Hart was funny on 40-Year-Old Virgin.
See.
But, as a stand-up, I don't think
The stand-up stuff is there are two.
He's really good at making money in Hollywood.
He works his tail off. I respect his grind, and I respect anybody who works as hard as he does.
And that's what people want to listen to The Drive about is our Kevin Hart takes.
Well, and the grind. And they respect my grind.
Last night.
I'm kind of the Kevin Hart of the local sports talk radio scene. It's not a big deal, but I respect the grind. The stand-up is horrible. And to force feed that to people, I think, was really blind and misguided. There were a couple of funny moments here or there, but not near enough. And I'm not tuned in to watch a stand-up comedy show. There are two stand-up comics that make me feel old and not be able to relate to young people, Kevin Hart and Pete Davidson. Pete Davidson has never said anything funny in the entire...
Good actor, though. He's good in movies. He's good in movies,
Come on, man.
King of Staten Island.
Come on.
No, hey, come on. Let's go there.
No. I'm not watching King of Staten Island because Pete Davidson is so...
It's a good Sundance movie.
He's so obnoxious.
I thought you were a man of the people.
Not when it comes to Pete Davidson.
Okay.
Because this is a disconnect. I've never heard him say anything that's funny. I've never seen him do an impression that's clever. I have no idea why he was on SNL. I think he's a total hack. When it
Oh,
comes
man,
to
you're
Kevin
killing-
Hart and Pete Davidson, I'm
killing
out.
me, man. There's got to be one. There's got to be one Pete Davidson type. What do you think got more viewership, the SNL 50 or the All-Star Game?
SNL 50.
Yeah.
Did you watch, by the way?
Oh yeah,
It's good, right?
absolutely.
See,
It was awesome.
you-
I got choked up during Sandler's song, man.
that was great.
Sandler. Nobody carries, I think, the weight of the people that brought him along the way Sandler does to this day. Like
Yeah, well
the
said.
way
Yeah.
he talks about guys like Farley and Hartman and just those guys, like you can tell that it still weighs on him 30, 35 years later. And it's cool because, I mean, here we are talking about SNL and Sports Talk Radio, which is totally fine.
Yeah,
Peyton
it's the
Manning
dri-
was there. Peyton Manning was there.
Drive 2-6, man.
Yeah,
You know the deal.
gotta feel some air. Yeah, I the SNL 50 was amazing, and if you gave me the two options between watching a team of who was on the Keontae George.
Mhm.
No offense to your guy Keontae. If you gave me the chance to watch Keontae George play Victor Wembanyama or watch SNL 50, I'll take SNL 50 10 times out of 10.
Hard to argue with that, and I think the numbers would back you up. Best SNL cast member of all time. You have a hot take on that? You can throw a few names out there.
I mean, my generation was, I had Farrell was my generation,
Yeah.
so I'll go Farrell. But like, I'm old enough that my friends' siblings bought the old best of VHS tapes of like Farley and Dana Carvey and Mike Myers. So we would watch those on VHS because we missed that era. Like, and I mean, some of those sketches, man, just kill me still. I mean, they're so amazing. But I'll go Farrell because that was my wheelhouse.
See, to me, it's Farley.
Yeah.
That's because that's my era. It's the Dana Carvey,
Yeah.
Adam Sandler, Al
Yeah.
Franken, Tim Meadows. Tim Meadows, wildly underrated. Phil Hartman, wildly underrated. Rest in peace.
Absolutely.
And you brought this up off air, which I think is spot on. And actually, there's a sports parallel because whichever generation you came up in,
Yeah.
that's who you think the best SNL cast is. Like, I'll have even parents or family members talk about Eddie Murphy and
Yeah.
talk about
Bill Murray,
Belushi
Aykroyd, yeah.
and and it's hard to argue with that. I don't think a lot of it has aged super well, and it doesn't land the way with me that it did with them. But there are, and back to not relating to the youngs, there are plenty of youngs that don't think Adam Sandler is funny because, in their defense, he has made a lot of really bad movies over the past. But here's what I love about him. I think he doesn't really give a rip. Like, he employs his family. He employs his friends.
Correct.
He's made hundreds of millions of dollars with his company. Is it Happy Madison?
Yep.
'Cause those are
Great pickup basketball player.
Great. Well,
I mean, gets involved in great pickup basketball
vibes.
games.
I think living a life like Adam Sandler seems very appealing to me.
100%.
All you do is work with your family and friends. Yeah.
If there are legit Sandler haters in the world,
Yeah.
I mean, listen, man, we're in a world of pain, on a multitude of reasons, but everybody just needs to calm down.
Yes, and just enjoy the thing that's in front of you for what it is.
Correct.
Unless it's the All-Star game because it's horrible.
That's called a transition, kids.
It is, and we'll catch a break. But coming up next, we'll move on from this stuff because there are college football topics to talk about today with Christopher Kamrani. The Big Ten and the SEC currently meeting in New Orleans, plotting a hostile takeover. Is that dramatic? Well, we'll tell you about it coming up next. Brought to you by our good friends at Prize Picks. It is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. All you do is pick more or less on at least two players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. You can run your game all season long on Prize Picks. You can win up to 1,000 times your money on Prize Picks with the second half of the basketball season starting tonight. Best way to get action on sports in more than 30 states, including California, Texas, Georgia, Florida, and Utah. Download that Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code ESPN700. You get $50 instantly when you play just $5. Don't even need to win to receive that $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. More with CK coming up next on a Wednesday right here on ESPN 700. About an hour away from first kick. I know you guys are pumped. I know when it comes to Sports Talk Radio in February, you want to talk CONCACAF Champions Cup. RSL, Herediano, first round. Aggregate comes into play here. Have you ever been to a soccer game down in Central America before?
I have not, no. MCL got to go cover that run, the GOAT, and he said it was insane.
How is our guy MCL?
He's good, man. He's got some kids and just living the dream. We miss him. Michael C. Lewis for the uninitiated.
Good people. I can remember, we're going to have Bill on today, actually. I think the first game that Bill called in Central America, he was with Dunny.
Yeah.
And Dunny was like, dude, just walk up the stairs. Don't look left or right.
Yep.
Let's get to the broadcast booth, and let's stay safe. And during the broadcast, and we'll get Bill to tell these stories, if I remember correctly, the fans were throwing, like, batteries at them.
Cool.
As they were trying. It is cool, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean,
as they were trying to
it just means more.
Cool, he says. Could do some damage at some point, though.
I mean, if they're triple A's,
that's fair.
Bill's a hardy Midwest man.
No, that's fair. Bill can take a couple batteries to the dome. You in any college hoops these days? You watch any college basketball?
You'll be proud of me.
Yeah.
I watched some of both of the Kansas losses to our local teams this week.
Wildly enough, Kansas did not lead for 1 second while they were here in state.
So my take is Kansas sucks because I had to cover them when they were here in the tournament last year, and that their big guy is probably going to make a lot of money playing like at Real Madrid or something, but like our guy is not giving more than like 50% effort out there.
Yeah.
And he was like that last year, and I feel like they have worse players this year, but like they lost to Utah, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but Utah is playing a style of basketball that's like me and like church ball in like 8th grade, where you just dribble it around and, you know, lift up your plant leg too soon and then look to throw it to somebody, because they were doing some wild stuff. And the fact that they got away with the win, good for them.
Your take on Kansas, I feel like, is correct.
Okay.
Because, and I don't want to come across as if I'm diminishing a really good win for Utah, a quad 1 win, and then BYU dog walked them. I mean, at one point, it was a 38-point game. It is tied for the biggest defeat Bill Self has ever suffered at Kansas. But, like, the defense for Kansas in both games, quite frankly, against Utah and BYU was atrocious. Now, to Bill Self's credit, he talked about it after the game. But, like, Trevin Nell, who plays for Brigham Young.
This is your guy. I know you have a bone to pick with our guy, Trevin.
I don't have a bone to pick with him. Why would I have a bone to pick with Trevin Nell? It's just, Chris, if you
I think he's a bountiful guy. Maybe I'm wrong.
No, I think he went to Woods Cross.
Okay, same thing.
Look, he can shoot the you-know-what out of the basketball.
Yeah.
He is an elite shooter.
Yeah.
But if he couldn't shoot it, he'd be in his 4th year blogging about BYU basketball for KSL.
There's lots of people around here that do that.
Exactly, because he's like 27. But that's what he can do. And they, like, ignored him. Kansas, there was no
closeouts.
Like, 0 closeouts, good term. Take away the airspace, get up in them, make them uncomfortable.
Yeah.
On the scouting report for Kansas, when it comes to number 21 on BYU, the one thing you can't let him do is shoot it from the outside, and that's the only thing they let him do. I mean,
it seems like they let everybody shoot from the outside.
But that's the thing. Like, I don't know what the game plan was, or if the players were just like, screw it and ignore the game plan. Like,
they were like, we went to Cubby's last night. We went too hard.
Mm-hmm.
We had a sprinkle milkshake, feeling a little bloated. Don't know where I'm going.
Little swig after party, and ultimately didn't have the energy. Like,
okay, here's one for you.
I was stunned at how poorly Kansas was defensively.
Richie Saunders.
Really good.
Future pro?
Yeah. Probably Europe.
Okay.
But I think he's BYU's best player. I don't think he's their best pro prospect.
Can he be Sam Merrill?
I don't think he can shoot it like Sam can shoot it.
Because nobody really saw. Sam's my guy.
Yeah.
Covered Sam in high school.
Go Braves.
Yep. A lot of people were like, Sam will make millions of dollars in Europe. And now he is a rotational player on the best team in the league. So.
Yeah, it's a good comp.
it just fit, style
it's a good comp, because the interesting thing is Richie's a better athlete than Sam is.
Yeah.
And Richie, up until like last year, was only like an energy guy that didn't shoot it very well. So he's clearly put in the work, because he is a knockdown shooter, maybe a fringe NBA guy. But
6'5".
He is 6'5", and he is a good athlete, but he doesn't shoot it the way Sam shoots it. My whole thing with Sam was like, if he can find a way to get a little stronger, and improve his release time, like have a
Get it
quicker
off
release,
fast,
then he has a shot because he's knocked down. My concern with him was what was going to happen with Sam Merrill is ultimately what happened with Jimmer Fredette.
Yeah.
Which is Jimmer is
Sam's also like 3 inches taller.
3 inches taller, but Jimmer is and always has been a ball in hand, shoot it off the dribble guy. He was never a great catch and shoot guy. But when he played at BYU, Dave said, "You've got the ball, you've got the greenest of green lights, so do your thing." So whenever Jimmer would go to the G League and played against lesser players where he had the ball in his hand, he was good. Then he went to the pros, he could never get his shot off.
Yeah.
And so my concern with Sam was like, will he be able to get that shot off? If he can, he's got a shot. And he deserves a lot of credit because he's worked his tail off. And instead of just being a spot-up shooter, he can shoot a little bit off the bounce. Richie might be BYU's best player right now, though.
Yeah. That was a good Richie Saunders tangent that we just went on.
I like Richie.
Yeah,
He's a good player.
Yeah, local kid.
Where did he go to high school?
Oh, shoot. I want to say PG, somewhere in that
It
area.
feels like somewhere down
American
there.
Fork, maybe.
Yeah, it feels like somewhere down there.
Okay.
Well, Mark wanted him to go to Kentucky.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and Richie decided to stay here.
Did anybody follow Mark to Kentucky? Oh,
Yes.
number 2, Jackson Robinson.
Jackson Robinson, look at you. Good pull.
Yeah.
But no, the reports were that Mark wanted Dallin Hall and Richie Saunders to follow him to Kentucky, and they both decided to stay down at BYU. And I do not have a bone to pick with Trevin Nell. I'm just saying it's amazing to watch a player who only does one thing be allowed to do that thing.
Yeah, makes sense.
It's like just leave Shaq open at the rim.
Yeah.
He's going to dunk it.
Yeah.
College football, you ready for it?
I'm ready. What are we mad about?
Well, we're not mad about anything, but for the second time in just a few months, the SEC and the Big Ten are having meetings this week in New Orleans about the proposed changes they want to scheduling partnerships, the CFP format, according to your guy, Stuart Mandel. I love it when Stuart is grumpy because he'll go
column.
off on
Yeah.
people.
His
Yeah.
column, yeah.
So what he wrote is the expectation is that these two conferences want the CFP to expand to 14 to 16.
14 or 16, yeah.
And then they get 4 auto bids each. Big 12, ACC get 2 each. And I think that leaves 1 for the G5 schools and maybe 3 at-large bids.
Correct.
Something like that.
Either 1 or 3, depending on if it's 14 or 16.
There it is.
Yep.
So what do you make of this? Do you think this is something that's going to come to fruition and potentially in 2026?
What's the golden rule, Spence?
I know. Man with the gold.
Yeah, this is always going to be an evolving reality. They're never going to settle on anything because nobody's ever going to be happy. And the more games they play, the more money they make. It is as simple as that. You don't need to go on Reddit and look for any sort of conspiracy theory or mystery box to open. It's not that. The Big Ten and the SEC can throw their weight around because they make the most money and they have the strongest, media partnership deals with these huge conglomerates, and more games means more money. That's it. Bottom line.
That's all it is.
Yeah.
So,
are they wrong?
Are they wrong that more games mean more money?
Are they wrong in basically hijacking this next iteration and what it could look like? Because if we're going beyond, if the Big Ten had a top 4 team last year, like you're talking about like Iowa in the playoff, nobody wanted to watch Iowa play. I think top 4 would have been like in the SEC, was like a 4-way tie between like Mississippi and Arkansas and all these teams. So there's always going to be somebody that's mad. But we are a country of addicts. We are obsessed with our entertainment, and we will be mad about it, and we will watch it, and then we will complain about it because that's what we do. And it's never been easier to watch things and complain about things.
How much time do you spend on Reddit?
I don't spend. I never got into it, and my buddies were really big into it, and I was always kind of skeptical. And I don't really understand the format all that well. Like you have to click the minus and the plus, and I don't know. I'm not very smart when it comes to it. It's got to be pretty streamlined for me.
Yeah, you strike me as a Reddit guy. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I'm full of surprises.
I mean, I'm not. That's not like a compliment, or I'm not knocking on you. You just strike me as somebody. I don't use it much. The only time I use it is if I'm doing a Google search.
Yeah.
And a Reddit thread is like, oh, that looks kind of interesting.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
I don't like following any wormholes. I don't like going down any wormholes. I feel like that's a dangerous a dangerous path to follow. Then the next thing, I'm going to be talking about vaccines and transgender athletes on air. I don't want to go down any of those rabbit holes. That's just me.
I don't want you to go down those rabbit holes either, Spence.
Have you ever followed a rabbit hole to the place where you don't feel like you're in a good spot anymore?
No, I have not.
What about the dark web? Do you spend time on the dark web?
Never. Not for 1 second.
I don't even know how to access it.
I don't either. I'm more about like watching Can't Hardly Wait for the millionth time.
Yeah, or a college football expanded CFP where it's diluted the regular season.
Yeah, put on Paul Feinbaum, see what he's saying. Those are my people, and that's my gig. So that's what I do.
I mean, if I could stretch a little bit.
Yeah, you can stretch.
From a sports talk radio standpoint, I do feel like 4 auto bids for each of these leagues does dilute the regular season, which to me is what makes college football special.
Correct. The regular season will not mean anything. Conference championship weekend will be gone, and frankly, I don't think that matters all that much. Like, it was already on its last legs anyways. Do get rid of it in this iteration. You'll prioritize the conference records, and that's it. The Wetzel 40 Dallinger podcast did a really good job this week diving into it, and 40 had an epic rant. I recommend people who know Pat 40, who is one of the luminaries in our business.
Friend of the show.
Yeah,
been on several times.
He did not mince words when talking about this potential iteration coming to fruition. They'll have to rethink things. The regular season will. I don't think it'll mean like non-conference games will not mean a thing, like other than bragging rights, because in this format you will primarily go on the basis of conference records. And listen, man, would people tune in to watch Utah play Ole Miss in a first-round game in a theoretical playoff? Yes, they would.
Of course.
Yeah. Would people tune in to watch Iowa play Miami? Yeah. We're talking about schools that have significant followings that are going to be involved more, and that's just the bottom line. Like, we're talking about fan bases that are part of cultures that are ingratiated in the sport at a level that some other programs in other parts of the country frankly aren't. And I say that being a West Coast kid, having a understanding of what the West Coast bias is against us, but can't complain.
Well, you can.
Deal with you can't. Okay, you can complain, but at the end of the day, you're still going to watch it. So get off your high horse.
Yeah, it's just, I'm trying, I guess, in a way, trying to hold on to what makes college football what college football is. And maybe I need to go the way of my all-star take where it's like Allen Iverson is not walking through that door to try to hang 30 on you in the fourth quarter. Instead, you get to see Donovan Mitchell not care about being, where he is, even though I think being named an NBA All-Star should mean something. I think that's something you should wear with pride and show up and do your job and do it to the best of your abilities. But if I guess where I'm at with it is if we're simply moving step by step slowly towards this eventuality that we all believe we're moving towards, rip the Band-Aid, man. Like, let's just get on with it.
I agree. But
what do you think's stopping it?
My guess is the ability to milk as much money along the way. Things don't happen. Massive change doesn't happen overnight. Like, remember the BCS and how people were so pissed off about it. Never in a million years did we think back then we were going to see a 14 playoff. Then we got it. And then never in a million years did we think, some other teams might have a chance to play for a national championship. We finally got it. This is just, the can is just going to be kicked down the road, and, the powers that be are going to make more money, and eventually, to your point, we'll get to this, proposed super conference, whatever we're going to call it, and we're going to watch it. And people will be left out, and they will be sad, and the people that are in will say, neener. Right?
Yeah, well, look, I know you're not wrong. I understand, and I'm a grown-up. I get it.
Am I acting too much of like a fatalist? Like,
No. Like, you're not wrong, but it's kind of like doing this job every day. I can't crack the mic and be like, hey, guys,
get over it.
The Jazz are rebuilding, so just get over it. And then, like, go home.
Yeah.
If I could, I would.
Yeah, that would be cool.
But you've got to dig into this in a way that isn't as reductive as you just made it, even though you're not wrong.
Yeah.
So, here, let me stretch. Let me try this. We're in the
softball.
We're in the Big 12 footprint.
Okay.
if you're not in the SEC and the Big Ten, do you have reason to be concerned, even if you're a program like the University of Utah?
For sure.
Yeah.
You don't have any power to wield in this scenario. And the two conferences that wield all the power are throwing their weight around. Maybe there will be an explosion of talent in the Big 12, and maybe Deion's Buffs will start 10-0, and maybe Utah will right the ship, and BYU,
Devin Dampier, baby.
Devin Dampier, and Jake Retzlaff will be a Heisman Trophy candidate, and Iowa State will pick up where they left off, and so on and so forth. They have to show it to the country first. Otherwise, they just don't have the clout built in that these other teams and other conferences do. Fair or not?
Yeah.
Like I understand that nobody wants to watch, Minnesota have a great year and then get into the playoff out here at least. And maybe some people do. But the reality is they're part of the club, and a lot of people aren't.
Do you think that the sport is in trouble at all in any way? You don't?
No.
Because at some point, whether it's the NBA and the apathy or college football and the disorganization, the only thing that will affect change if you're not in the room is enough people not tuning in to affect their bottom line.
College football, to me, is the most like international club soccer, though. Like, you're talking about where people grew up, where they went to school. You are celebrating a sport that is always going to be in lockstep with your perceived best years of your life. And that carves out a special place in the hearts of fans. And I just don't really see that evaporating. It is funny, though, like, as we've talked about in the past, like, when that proposed super conference over in Europe was put on the table, and basically everybody, all the fans of the teams that would have been included, were like, this is BS. We're going to storm the field and like say, like, we won't let you play games because this is unfair to the little guys.
Yeah.
Here in this country, we're just like, see ya, good luck.
Yeah.
We are a have and have not country when it comes to a lot of things, but in sports especially.
You know what? And if I'm leaning into some altruistic approach, I apologize. One of the reasons I've always wanted to, I played sports as long as I could. And then in my career, I've done a bunch of different things all around sports and entertainment. Before I got into radio, I worked for the Olympics. I was with Disney's Wide World of Sports for a little bit, then got into radio. And one of the reasons, I've always wanted to stay around it is it seemed to be one of the portions of our ecosystem in this country that isn't simply just run like a Fortune 500 company.
It was a safe space.
Well, and look, I grew up with VC guys. These guys are sharks, okay? And I never had any interest in...
What does VC mean?
Venture capitalists.
Oh, okay.
These guys are sharks, man. And I never had any interest of hopping on the train to go to Grand Central at 6:30 a.m. to work on Wall Street for 14 hours a day until you got yours, and then telling everybody to go bleep themselves at the age of 35 because you bought an island. Maybe I should have questioned my life choices at 22.
Is it too late to do that for us?
Probably. Well, for me, man, like, I'm turning 47 next month, bro. So, this is the deal.
I turned 39 this year, so.
You're still so young.
Yeah, I have so much ahead.
You know what? It's not too late for you.
Okay,
if you want to be a VC, bro, you're gonna have to cut the hair.
Ooh,
you're gonna have to wear like a suit.
I'm
telling you, I saw my high school friends grind for like a decade. To the point where I'd go visit them in Midtown.
Like
four
Wolf
of them,
Wall Street stuff?
Yes, four of them shacked up in this little apartment. They all essentially have a closet to sleep in. But these are like Yale MBAs. These are Harvard MBAs. These are like Ivy League, Brooks Brother wearing me if I chose an alternate reality way back in the day before I chose fun over that.
Sure.
And they all kind of said the same thing. We just know we have to do this for like 8 to 10 years and then we're good. Right? And so I understand, and I'm a grown-up about front-facing, revenue-generating businesses. But, like, if sports has now only leaned into capitalism, because Adam Silver runs the NBA like a Fortune 500 company in a way that David Stern didn't necessarily. And David knew it was a business, but he cared about fan relations and the product and the consumer and the way the sport was covered. And there is this feel around pro basketball that they're simply, as Jason Kidd said out loud 2 years ago, millionaires cheering for each other, and they don't give a rip about anything else.
Well, you can see where they're coming from if you look at the current landscape of even professional sporting events. Why is it now more than ever that companies have a stranglehold on several hundred, sometimes thousands of tickets at these things where it's like, hey, we have this suite, well, we have this suite, we have that suite, because they have money to throw around. Whereas like if you go to a Jazz game, there are going to be people in the upper deck who love the Jazz, have probably cheered for the Jazz their whole life, and are they ever going to be presented with an opportunity to sit in a catered suite with R&R Barbecue or Cubbies or Cafe Rio or whatever, Cup Pop? Like, no, man. Like, we are trending that direction because now more than ever, a lot of rich companies have a lot of money to throw around, and they're going to probably write it off as, oh, this is a business expense. We'll take some people there, and we'll have our suite, and we'll have our multiple suites, and then we'll have our floor seats, and so on and so forth. Like, next time you go to a Jazz game, like, look who's down there, and who's down there like the last 15 years. Vivint people, Qualtrics people, obviously now with Ryan Smith owning the Jazz. Like, it is not hard to see where this thing is going, and it is, I don't know. Maybe back. I mean, you used to go to Jazz games back in the day. Maybe they once in a while.
I still go to Jazz games.
I mean,
did
like,
JP put you up to that?
I'm just saying, like, does the doc exist in this generation of Jazz fandom?
I don't think so. No, it's look, it's a very depressing yet fair point. Trucks and Teslas, a lot of bedazzled jeans and straight brim hats with dudes that probably should leave the straight brim.
Lots of spray tans.
Is there anything more awkward than seeing like a dude in his mid-50s that is clearly holding on with steroids and fake tanning and bedazzled jeans and really tight shirts and a straight billed baseball hat? It's like,
dude, why do you want to look like me?
It's really awkward.
It's like, I don't need a spray tan, but you don't need to look like me. Just look like yourself.
Yeah, it's a bad look. But look, man, I can't cover it like this. I can't do the thing where, even though there's part of me that understands your point and believes that you're telling the truth, this is supposed to be the toy aisle of life. And I can't just crack a microphone every day and say, hey, guys, just so you know, the ownership groups of the team that you love care about one thing, and that's creating shareholder value for their investors. Okay, good night. Talk to you tomorrow. Like, it can't be reduced to just that.
We talked about Isaiah Collier last week, Spence.
We did.
We covered Isaiah. Maybe next week we can talk about Kyle Filipowski.
Flip, as we call him.
Okay.
Okay, so if you're a Jazz fan right now, if you're a football fan right now, and you're tuned into the program,
okay,
and you have suddenly become
you're like this MFer again,
acutely aware that it doesn't matter how much you love this team, doesn't matter how much you want to see them do well, it doesn't matter what you invest in this team. The people in charge don't give a rip about you, and the people running these leagues only care about one thing, and that's creating shareholder value for their investors. What's going through your mind? If that's all that really there is, there's no reason to give a rip about any of it, quite frankly.
Well, if you are
depressing.
If you are a Utah sports fan, meaning that if you are a University of Utah or BYU sports fan, be happy because within the last 30 years, you've been able to cheer on very good teams in a multitude of sports at a level that a lot of other colleges in this country don't ever reach, especially at your level. If you're a pro fan, if you're a fan of the Jazz or RSL, you've watched your soccer team hoist a title. You've watched your basketball team make the playoffs like 25 out of 30 years. Like, sorry. Like, again, I'm going to continue to beat this drum. Like, you want to know who's sad, Spence? Charlotte Hornets fans. Like, come on. If you have no reason to be sad as a sports fan in Utah. You really don't.
Well, but based off this conversation, you have no reason to be happy if you're a sports fan anywhere.
The truth is always in the middle.
Yeah. It's so sad. I might as well start a radio show covering tech bros raising funds to start an app in San Francisco.
No. What you're going to do is you're going to turn on the CONCACAF match on your laptop.
I'm juiced, man.
In 30 minutes, and you're going to see what the shape looks like.
I'm not going to lie. I like when RSL is playing. I enjoy the soccer stuff.
Of course.
You know,
it's great. It takes up so much time. We need a distraction, and it can be bad. and it often is bad. Sometimes it's good.
Yeah.
But what are we going to do, man? We're almost 40 and 40. Like, what are we doing?
Oh, I'm close to 50, bro.
Well,
Coming up next month, I'll be much closer to 50 than I am to 40.
that's okay.
I'm hanging in.
Yeah.
Doing all right. All right, dude. Well,
What's your prediction for the match tonight?
1-1 draw.
Bring home a point?
My guy Diogo scores on a free kick.
Free kick? Okay.
Mhm.
All right.
What do you think the formation will be?
Mm,
I read you the starting 11. They have 4 defenders.
yeah, so it'll be yeah, I mean, they'll go 4-2-3-1.
4-2-3-1.
Yeah.
Yeah, because our guy Forrester is the only
Forster,
striker.
Yeah.
They're going to bring in a striker before the start of the season?
Well, the guy that they traded for that was going to be like the ideal replacement for Chicho decided he didn't want to come to Salt Lake, and he was offended by the trades. Do
Wait,
you
who
not
is
know about
this? Who?
Elias Manuel.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah, Tom Bogert reported today that Elias Manuel did not understand the trade mechanisms within MLS and was unhappy when the Red Bulls decided to trade him.
So, translation, he didn't want to live in Utah.
He said, according to a statement provided to Tom by him, he has lots of respect for RSL, but he didn't want to be traded.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, illuminating stuff, CK.
Great. The sun's coming out. We're good, man.
Hey,
Everybody's good.
We might get 50 degrees this weekend
You gonna go golfing?
if there's a spot. The rotator cuff is ready. I can swing a club.
All right, man.
6 weeks of PT. Let's get you out this year.
Yeah.
Christopher Comrani from The Athletic, brought to you today by our good friends at Burt Brothers. Check them out with over 30 years of experience in nearly 30 locations. Burt Brothers ASC certified technicians bring expertise and professionalism to every interaction, industry-leading warranties, and low-price tire guarantees. Our good friends at Burt Brothers is a one-stop shop for all reliable repairs and maintenance, from tires and alignments to fluids and brakes, offering a full range of automotive services tailored to meet your needs. Now offering value tire options, such as Americas and Summit tires, starting at just $69 with warranties that go up to 70,000 miles. As one of the few AAA certified shops in Utah, Burt Brothers upholds the highest standards in automotive service. Stop by Burt Brothers, your Tire Busters locations, or schedule an appointment today to experience the trusted service that has made them a Utah favorite for over 3 decades. Burt Brothers, doing it better since day one. Check them out online at burtbrothers.com. Also, time now for your chance to win tickets to see the Utah men's basketball team after couple of big wins. Text Utes right now to 33986 for a chance to win Utah men's basketball tickets. All right, we got 2 hours down. We got 2 hours to go. The Four Nations Face-Off is tomorrow, and Neil Smith joins us coming up next to break it down. After Neil stops by, the voice himself, Bill Riley, is our guest. Got dialed into the drive with Spence Checketts on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Proud to be part of Utah's ESPN radio network. All right, we got the voice of the Utes coming up in about 30 minutes from right now. Bill Riley stops by. Utah basketball, winners of a couple of games against the Kansas teams over the weekend, K-State, and, of course, Rock Chalk Jayhawks. University of Kansas going home without leading for 1 second against either Utah or BYU. BYU dog-walked them last night, so stay tuned for that. But the Four Nations face-off comes to a close tomorrow in Boston. Our next guest joins us on a weekly basis to talk hockey, talk NHL. Neil Smith on a Wednesday afternoon. Neil, happy Wednesday, sir. How are you?
Very good, thanks, Spence. How about you? I've had a little bit of a break here from the NHL, so that's been nice. Got to watch some great hockey, though, with the Four Nations.
So, Neil, if memory serves, initially you were not too thrilled at the prospect of what this tournament could bring us. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely fair, because I just saw it as an NHL tournament that was sort of being positioned as a national, and somehow had national pride in it. But the players played so hard in this thing. I didn't expect them to play as hard as they were playing. I still know that it's not a truly country representative tournament, because you have to play in the NHL to be able to be in the tournament. But having said that, I've never seen NHL players play even close to this in an all-star game, which is what this took the place of. So anything that can bring great hockey in place of the all-star game, which is bad hockey, I'm all for.
So, Neil, educate us a little bit on the U.S.-Canada rivalry in hockey. Now, for a long, long time, and I'm going to give you the space here because I'm not the expert you are, but for a long, long time, it was like Canada and Russia, because the U.S. wasn't necessarily a hockey country that could rival those two. So it feels, from my perspective, that the juice is kind of upped over the past, I should say, the last 20 years, 25 years or so. But obviously, these are two teams representing two countries that have a healthy amount of sports hate for each other. So educate us a little bit on this rivalry and why it's so intense.
Well, Spence, it actually started 45 years ago when the 1980 Miracle team won the gold medal at Lake Placid, the American team. And that inspired a lot of young Americans to want to play hockey. And then along came, in the 80s, after that, Wayne Gretzky gets traded to the LA Kings from Edmonton. And all of a sudden, LA now has a superstar, generational, unbelievable talent like Wayne Gretzky, and all the celebrities and everybody wants to go and start going to the LA Forum and seeing the LA Kings play. And then, along comes Disney, who puts a team in Anaheim. And then there's a team that gets put in San Jose by the Guns. They put that team in, and they started off in the Cow Palace in San Francisco and then went up to San Jose. So hockey was moving into non-traditional places a little while later. Phoenix, as you and I wouldn't be talking right now had there not been a Phoenix Coyotes. And then, there were other non-traditional markets. Florida suddenly came in. Tampa came in at the time that Ottawa got back in the league. Florida came in when Anaheim came in. So you had these outposts of non-traditional hockey, because in the United States, the hockey players were coming in the 70s primarily from Boston, New England area, and from Minnesota, maybe a little bit of Michigan, but that was about it. And there was never a hockey player coming out of Texas or Nevada or California or even Long Island. And it's been this growth of the NHL and hockey in general, and the exposure that the NHL's gotten to so many different places, that I think has inspired young athletes to want to become hockey players, and that's what they've done. So what am I saying about Canada? Well, Canada has basically stayed the same. They've been hockey crazy throughout the country the whole time. It has not waned. It has not gone up. It has stayed the same. How many people live in Canada? About 35 million. How many people live in the States? 330 million. So if you start to get the United States passionate about hockey, it won't be long before the United States is going to catch up to a country that's a tenth of its size in production of hockey players. And I really believe that's what's happened. They've caught up. They're producing a volume of really talented hockey players that matches Canada. So the supremacy that Canada used to have, because it was every kid playing on a rink in the winter, has now competed, is very competitive by the United States, who has, even though they don't have the percentage of young athletes picking hockey, just the smaller percentage of American young athletes picking hockey probably equals what they have in Canada. So this is why the rivalry has gotten more intense. It was for a long time that Canada would always beat the United States. And then in the 90s, in the World Cup in 1996, the United States won that against Canada. And that was quite a thing for the United States, again, inspiring young people to play, showing that they can be competitive and beat Canada. And then it's just grown from there. So that's the rivalry. Then you've got just the natural North American rivalry of the countries of Canada and the United States. You know, Canada is the little guy looking at the big, the elephant down below, saying, this is the superpower of the world, the number one richest nation in the world. Canada's pretty well off, but, Canada is dwarfed by the United States, of course. And there is a rivalry there. Everybody speaks the same language. They've got a common border that's not hard to get across to go and play sports against each other. And I think it's natural that, Americans want to beat Canadians, and Canadians really want to beat Americans because they want to have one thing that they're better than the United States. So that's a long way of giving you the history of it and where it is today.
We had a pretty unique experience out this way in 2002 with the Winter Olympic Games being held in Salt Lake. And I can remember watching the Canada-U.S. gold medal game. Canada won that one 5-2. And so I think a lot of people out this way got a little bit of a taste of that rivalry. But does it feel now, and maybe I'm being a prisoner of the moment, because I've got to say, Neil, I was pretty excited to watch U.S.-Canada on Saturday night. I did not think I was going to watch a game that had 3 fights in the first 9 seconds, and I did not think I was going to be watching a game that would lead to the Americans winning on Canadian soil in Montreal. And so I'm not trying to be a prisoner of the moment, but does it feel like this current iteration has taken another level of intensity, or was that just a moment in time on Saturday night?
No, I don't think it was a moment in time on Saturday night. I don't at all. I think that I don't like those fights at the beginning of the game, because 2 of them with the Tkachuk brothers were staged fights. And what I mean by that is there was no reason for them. There's no anger. Nobody had done anything. And all of a sudden, these 4 guys all decided they're going to fight. The other fight between JT Miller and Parayko, that was some pushing and shoving, and some things were said, and some back and forth that led to that one. So that one, I'm okay with. I don't think it's a moment in time. I think that the United States is very competitive with Canada, and I don't think that the United States has taken over Canada yet. I don't think, no matter who wins tomorrow night, that necessarily means that, if Canada wins, and Canada is still the powerhouse of the world, and if the United States wins, well, there's got to be a passing of the torch. I don't believe that. I think we're in a time right now in 2025, and let's say 2020 to 2030, that these teams are really closely balanced. They're close to each other. The countries are close in being able to put out competitive teams. I do think there'll come a day, and don't forget, I'm born Canadian, that the United States will be able to have a stronger production of star players than Canada, simply based upon the fact that the population is so much bigger and so many more kids are going to be interested in playing.
So I want to follow up on something you referenced, and you did explain why you called these fights staged. But this kind of took another level as Matthew Tkachuk and Brandon Hagel, who fought, I believe that was the first fight of the night, have kind of exchanged barbs back and forth over the past couple of days. And Hagel said it was, quote, done. What he did as far as the fight goes was for the flag and not the cameras. And and then he continued. He said, quote, we don't need to initiate anything. We don't have any group chats going on. What's going on out there playing our game and giving it everything and doing it for our country. We just want to play as hard as we can and do it for the flag on the chest. This is clearly a shot at what you said, right? He's clearly taking a shot at the Tkachuk brothers and JT Miller for pre-planning these fights. Tell me, is it like an unwritten rule? Is it a code in hockey where that's just not the way you go about your business of pre-planning these fights?
No, I don't want to say that. I mean, this does happen when somebody wants to send a message right away that, you know what, we're not going to back down from you guys. And I think the Tkachuks were the ones that instigated those. I may be wrong. I wasn't on the ice. I didn't hear the language going back and forth. What's really amazing about those two things, if you think about it, is first of all, it's Matthew Tkachuk and Hagel. Hagel plays for Tampa Bay Lightning. Matthew plays for Florida Panthers. There's a little bit of a rivalry right there. And then you get Brady Tkachuk, who's the captain of the Ottawa Senators, 90 miles from where that building he was in Montreal, and the rival of the Montreal Canadiens. And he fights his brother's teammate, Sam Bennett. Like, I'm sure Sam Bennett and Matthew Tkachuk are friends, and Brady called him on. So there was an irony in those two things. But it happens more in playoffs than in anything. When the playoff intensity comes, sometimes you'll see real good players just say, call on one of the real good players on the other team. I remember it happening with Claude Giroux and Sidney Crosby when Philadelphia and Pittsburgh played in the playoffs. And, you can go back to 2005 when the two captains of the Calgary Flames and the Tampa Bay Lightning were in the final. And it was like Vincent Lecavalier from Tampa and Jerome McGinley from the Calgary Flames. They got in, they had a go right in the final. And so this will happen from time to time, but it's these are young guys that got tons of testosterone and it's going 1,000 miles an hour inside of them, and it just shows though how badly they want to win.
You got to help me understand what the hell JT Miller was thinking. I mean, the Colton Parayko kid who he went at was like twice his size. I mean, a lot of the attention has been on the Tkachuk brothers and what they did. But it was a little Ty Domi-ish, wasn't it? It looked like that was a big-time mismatch, Neil.
Well, it did, but that's JT Miller. He's a bit of a pit bull. I think he was trying to prove something right there, that he's in there for the fight, and he'll take on a big guy. Colton Parayko isn't really a fighter. He's a big man and a good player. Obviously, he wouldn't be on Team Canada if he wasn't. But he's not really what you would call a fighter, but he's not a wuss either. So I mean, yes, JT Miller was taking on a big dog, and it was a mismatch. But I think he was trying to prove something for his team as well.
So look, it's easy to draw a straight line between the three fights and that 3-1 win. Is that a real thing? Do you think the U.S. was motivated with the actions of the Tkachuk brothers and JT? And did that give them enough juice to go on and win? Can we be that reductive that it actually did make a tangible difference?
I don't know that those things really, at the end of the day, you can point to them and say that they had a part of why the Americans won. Let's go through the game and remember that Connor McDavid scored an unbelievable goal.
Yeah, he did.
To make it 1-0. And so Canada was up 1-0. The United States tied it, and then I believe it was the second goal that was a bad goal on Jordan Binnington, and he threw his head back and looked up at the ceiling when he saw that had squeaked through. So that was a bad goal. Connor Hellebuck, you don't get bad goals on him. The goal that was scored on him was scored on him by the best player in the league, flying at him at about 30 miles an hour. So, you know what? I said it, and I'll say it again about the game tomorrow night. The U.S. has some injuries. That's going to play a part in it. But the number one thing is Canada has to figure out a way to beat Connor Hellebuck, who's the best goalie in the world right now. And isn't it ironic, too, though, that Connor Hellebuck, who is an American, is the goaltender of the Winnipeg Jets. So there he is all season long playing in Canada and now doing everything he can tomorrow night to break the hearts of all the Canadians. I just find it ironic.
So Charlie McAvoy, he's out for Team USA, and he put a hit on, was it McDavid? Who did he hit? I think he hit Connor.
McDavid.
Yeah. Yes, that's right. And I wanted to ask you, because Connor McDavid, potentially the best hockey player in the world, maybe not potentially, maybe he is. And I feel like once upon a time, maybe I'm misremembering, there are like unwritten rules about putting massive hits on some of these skilled players that are big-time stars. Like no one ever hit Gretzky, right, from what I can recall. Like he was protected. Was that bad form of McAvoy to put that hit on McDavid?
No, not at all. In fact, I think that's another one of the things that inspired his team. I think that was a great hit. And what I'm really happy about from my little perch is that the Canadians didn't go after McAvoy and try to fight him because he laid out a good hit. So many times in the NHL, you'll see a really good hit. And I'll bet you Sergachev comes up with good ones from time to time. And then all of a sudden he's got to fight some guy from the other team, and it was a clean hit. It just happened to be the guy had his head down or whatever. I thought that was exciting to see Charlie McAvoy hit Connor McDavid in that way. I don't think I've ever seen him hit like that. But he's a big guy. He can take it. Wayne, in his day, he wasn't a small man, but he was small compared to the size of the league. And so everybody said to the other team, if you come near him, you're going to pay. So, it was an unwritten thing, like, you better be ready if you're going to try to hit 99.
How much of this, I don't know, we don't do a lot of politics on the show for obvious reasons, but there is this kind of undercurrent of, the comments made by Donald Trump, 51st state, all that stuff, and then the Canadians boo our national anthem, and then a lot of people drawing a line between the booing of the national anthem and the decision-making of the U.S. team to fight from the drop of the or even before like things got going. How much of that do you buy into? Do you believe it's real as far as the passion that appears to be permeating between these two teams?
Well, I'm not very proud of my fellow Canadians booing the American national anthem for any reason at any time. The United States and Canada are best of friends. They'll be best of friends before this current administration, and they'll be best of friends after this current administration. And I don't think that that's the way you do things. But you're in a hockey arena. Fans can say whatever they want. They can do whatever they want. And but I don't agree with it. Does it motivate the American players? I'll bet you it does, because it's fun to be in a building where it's seething and you win the game, or you might be able to beat their team. It's fun. So I think it inspired people. I don't. Again, I'm repeating myself, but I don't like that kind of thing because the Americans have always been there for the Canadians, and the Canadians have always been there for the Americans when it comes right down to it. When it comes to important stuff other than sports, we've always been the best of friends, and so I didn't like that.
So Montreal, a century, if not more, of hockey history. And I was not in the building, of course, but holy smokes, did that environment look electric. What sort of environment do you think Boston, a great domestic hockey city, but certainly not with the history of Montreal, is going to bring coming up tomorrow night? I mean, Neil, there are reports that current NHL players have reached out to try to get tickets, and people are like, sorry, like we're sold out. There are no comps available. What sort of atmosphere do you think we're in for tomorrow night in Boston?
I think you're in for an electric atmosphere. I don't think it'll, and I might be wrong. So this is just, I don't think, it's not going to be. I don't think it will be as passionate as Montreal, because I don't think that you have the passion for a U.S. hockey team like you have for Team Canada in Montreal. I think you have a very passionate Boston crowd for the Boston Bruins. But I think you're going to have a lot of Canadian fans sneak into that building, meaning that they bought tickets through somebody. I mean, and they got in there, and they're going to be cheering for the Canadian team. But it will be electric. It will definitely be a pro-U.S. side for sure. Probably not as pro-U.S. as the Bell Center was pro-Canadian. But, I mean, I'm really looking forward to the game tomorrow night. And I'm a guy, like you said, and I admit it, didn't think this would be the greatest of all little tournaments here, but it's turned out to be one of the best ones I've ever seen.
All right, Neil, before I set you loose, what are we in for tomorrow? How do you think it goes down?
Well, it's going to be close, and that's sort of a bailing out by saying that. I think Canada's going to be able to do it just because of the injuries that the United States has and because of the power play that the Canadians have. But again, it's going to be close, and it sure could go the other way for sure. It's just, it's just going to be a great hockey game. And I have no dog in the fight. I've been living in the United States far longer than I lived in Canada. So I don't have a dog in this fight, meaning I'm not cheering for either side. I'm just looking at it as an observer, as somebody who's trying to get it right so that I can come on a show like this and be right. But that's all I'm looking for.
Well, it's always great to get your perspective as somebody who's steeped in the hockey history of both countries. I can't wait for it. I think it's going to be exciting, and I'm excited to break it down with you next week. Enjoy the game, Neil. We'll chat soon, okay?
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, the great Neil Smith, former general manager of the Rangers and the Islanders, Canadian-born, and now lives here in the United States. We have the Four Nations face-off for you guys tomorrow night on the station, by the way. It follows the Craig Smith Coaches Show, which follows our show, which ends at 6 o'clock. We're going to bring in Bill Riley coming up next, the voice of the Utes. But new year, new you, new budget. Save money. Save money with your cable. Save money with your internet. Save money with your wireless. Save money, period. No matter what, it's always a good thing. All you have to do is dial 801-424-DISH. What's going on, Ryan?
Spence, thanks so much. Loving the deals and offers we have right now. Truly, we've had a couple of customers that are in the thousands. They call up, take advantage of the offer. That saves them $60, $80 a month. But then we find they got a pre-qual gift card mailed to them. And then we can also get them set up with a Netflix offer. You get that free for the next 2 years. That's worth $431. Guys, this is blowing the doors off all the services out there. Listen, if you went to streaming and you've now found you're spending $80, $90, $100 a month, guys, it's going to get more. Just call now, lower the bill, get the free stuff, get the gift cards, get the dinner at JCW's on us. But, you can also get Netflix free for the next 2 years. That's a huge incentive to save a ton of money. Guys, it's free stuff just for you. You just got to call 424-DISH, 801-424-DISH.
All right, Riles joins us coming up next right here on ESPN 700.
Utah can hang on here. They'll have their first win over a ranked opponent since they beat BYU December the 9th of 2023. 4 seconds, 3 seconds, 2 seconds. Griffin at the buzzer. No good. And Utah has upset the 17th ranked team in college basketball. The Utes beat the Kansas Jayhawks tonight, 74-67 here at the Huntsman Center. And it's a great night to be a Ute here in Salt Lake City.
You're going to make Ute fans get emotional today. Playing a little Riles highlight coming out of a little Streets Have No Name. A little nostalgic for the Bill Riley Show. Middays for a number of years here. Bill Riley, happy Wednesday, sir. How are you?
Is this back-to-back Bill Riley segments with Spence Checketts where Porter played a highlight?
I am. Our little guy's all grows up. He's all grows up. If I could quote Swingers, the movie, he's all grows up. He's all grows up. I'm very impressed that Porter back-to-back for 2 Bill Riley hits has come out of a music bed with a highlight. I'm very proud of him.
He's you know, it's nice to see when your kids have grown up and they make you proud.
Indeed. And that's what he's done. So we're proud of our guy today. Hey, random start to the interview. If my memory serves, you had a couple of situations where you called soccer games in Central America where maybe things were a slight dicey. Is that fair to say?
Brian Dunseth and I had one really dicey night in Costa Rica at Saprissa, yes.
Any details you'd like to share? Because I can remember Dunny basically saying, like, he had to tell you, like, we're just walking straight to the press box and we're not going to say anything.
Yeah, we were in the press box at Saprissa in Champions League, and it was a wide open press box. Like, there was no security. It was like going to, like, Skyline High School or something. And we're up there doing the game, and there's like 6 guys that are like 20 rows below us in luchador masks that are huge Saprissa fans. And every time something good for Real Salt Lake would happen and I called a goal or something, they would turn around and start screaming and yelling stuff at us in Spanish. I don't speak any Spanish. Dunny does. And I would look at Dunny, and he'd kind of make a face, and he'd be like, that's not good. And so when the match ended and Real Salt Lake advanced, and it was a 2-2 tie, I think, and they advanced, Saprissa fans were not happy, nor were these 6 guys in the luchador masks. And we're doing postgame, and they're not leaving. They're like standing there 10, 20 rows below us just looking up at us because it's an open press box. And we're still going, and they have not left. And I'm looking at Dunny, and we have to walk down through the stands to get to the bus. There's not like an elevator or any of that stuff. And finally, the security clears them out, but they're like standing at the portal inside the stadium, kind of peeking up at us. And we get off the air, and I'm looking at Dunny, and I'm going, what are we going to do here? He's like, we're going to tear our stuff down, and we are going to sprint across the field to the bus. And that's what we did. And luckily, those guys were nowhere to be found. But they were making comments in Spanish that were apparently not great for Dunny and I.
Well, I'm glad you made it home safe. I'm glad it all worked out. I knew there was some sort of hairy situation I talked to you or Dunny about back in the day. Obviously, RSL starting their CONCACAF journey today. But we'll move over now to some college basketball where, don't look now, if Craig Smith and the Utah Utes can win 3 of their final 5 games, we have a 10-win Big 12 conference basketball team, which is something I didn't think we'd be able to say. Now, we'll get to the end in a moment, but let's look back on a weekend where I said last week it feels like a split would be a win because Kansas State, prior to going to BYU, had won 6 straight. They had turned it around. And look, your Rock Chalk Jayhawks have a tremendous amount of talent on paper. But, Bill, I've got to say, man, I've watched every moment of the Utah-Kansas game and the BYU-Kansas game. I am extremely unimpressed with Bill Self's team, which is something I never thought I'd say. But give me your thoughts. You can either go both games, one game individually, on the 2 wins Utah Hoops had over the teams from your home state, Kansas.
Well, you're right about Kansas. They're a disappointment. They're a collection of good individual players that are not a team, and that's very much unlike Bill Self teams, but that's maybe the era we live in now with the NIL. But to Utah. We'll start first with the Kansas game. To this point in the season, to that point, that was the most dialed in I had seen Utah play. I mean, locked into the game plan, played very well. Kansas never led in that game, Spence. Utah led wire to wire. There were a couple of ties, but Kansas never had the lead. Utah began the game well, had a little bit of a drought in the middle there, but then closed the second half out well. They played really well. They rebounded well and didn't turn it over at a high rate. And it was fantastic. They were dialed in, played excellent. Gabe Matson shot the heck out of the basketball, and it was great. And then the Kansas State game, they've got a couple of dudes as well. They've got Doug McDaniel, the kid from Michigan, and obviously the kid from Illinois that transferred in, Coleman Hawkins. They spent a bunch of the offseason on NIL. Utah played a good game there too. Again, didn't turn it over at a high rate, rebounded when they had to, and more importantly, Spence, they played really well the weekend before at both Cincinnati and West Virginia until about the last 3.5 minutes of the game. And they didn't make plays, and those two teams did. Well, in the Kansas and in the Kansas State game, Utah played well throughout, and then in the final couple of minutes, they made winning plays, and Kansas State didn't. So I think it's taken them a minute to get here. They've kind of figured out what it takes to play in the Big 12 from an intensity and physicality level. But I think they're in a good spot right now. 15-11, 7-8 in the Big 12. I mean, again, not great yet, but 7-8 with some winnable games left. Remember, they were picked 16th in the preseason. Not the preseason polls mean anything, but they were. And I thought they'd outperform that ranking. But right now, I think they're in a pretty good place.
How have the crowds been up at the Huntsman Center? Last home game I was at was BYU. But, when you're able to get some wins and you're able to get a little momentum, maybe more people will start paying attention. So the atmosphere, both Kansas and K-State, what was it like in the building?
Well, Kansas was good. I mean, it wasn't sold out like BYU, but it was probably 12,000. A lot of Kansas fans, they travel well now. Kansas, Kentucky, schools like that, you can't get tickets at home games, so you travel. So there was a fair amount of Kansas fans, but the atmosphere was great. And then for Monday night, it wasn't bad. Again, it's a Monday night. It's in Utah. I would say, I think there were about 12.5 on Saturday, probably just under 10 on Monday. So the crowds are good. They're not where they need to be yet, but they're getting better and better. And, when you start winning basketball games and you're winning against good programs, people come out to those games. So I'd say the atmospheres have been better the last couple of weeks.
So are we getting a little bit closer? And maybe it just depends on the night, but there's only a handful of games left. It does feel like Craig has landed on his preferred starting five. And all five of those players against Kansas played at least 29 minutes. I mean, Ezra played 29. Well, Lawson played 25, but Lawson obviously needed to be saved a little bit because he matched up so well with Hunter Dickinson. Like, Utah matches up well with Kansas, there's no doubt. But your thoughts on kind of this ever-evolving organism that is the rotation for Craig and this Utah team? Are we close to kind of landing on his preferred guys at this point?
I think, he's got his starting five. He's still inconsistent at point guard, and he said that the other night in the post-game show. Some nights Sharp, Johnson, Little show up together. Some night neither one of them show up. Some nights they'll show up. One will show, one won't. I think he's got the other guys pretty dialed in. Gabe, Wallen's giving him great minutes. Keanu Dawes is giving him great minutes. Lawson Lovering made some free throws the other night, which was great. He's giving them good minutes too. If they could get just a little bit more out of their point guard spot, Spence, I think they'd feel pretty good. He's still playing, depending on the game, 9 or 10 guys. But I think he's got probably his top 5 or 7 kind of locked into place right now. And it's just kind of what are you getting on a given night at the point guard spot right now?
5 games left, which is wild, but March is right around the corner now. If they get 3 of the final 5, they win 10 conference games. I did not think they would scratch double digits. What's your confidence level that this team can get 3 of the final 5 to get to that 10-win mark in Big 12 play year one?
I think it's possible. Now, 3 of those 5 are on the road. So you've got to go to UCF. That's a winnable game. UCF's got a lot of great offense, but they're, right now they're 4-11. Arizona, where Utah hasn't won in the Pac-12, now Big 12 era. So that'll be tough. ASU at home, very winnable game. West Virginia at home, that's a winnable game. And then, of course, the rivalry game down at BYU. You beat them here, but, you've got to go down there and play them. So, The only one I'd circle and say, man, it's going to be an uphill climb for sure is the Arizona game, because it's just history's not on their side, and Zona in that building at McHale is so good. But those other 4 games are all winnable games for Utah. You know, you've only got one conference road win right now. That was the game at TCU. But maybe you find another one on this road trip and then take care of business at home against Arizona State and West Virginia. So to your point, can they get 10? Absolutely. But they're going to have to figure out how to win at least 1, maybe 2 on the road.
What do you think Mark Harlan and Taylor Randall, the powers that be at the University of Utah, are looking for from this team this year to indicate that they've seen enough to look? I think they're giving Craig another year next year, no matter what. It's the final year of his deal. But what sort of, benchmarks or boxes are we looking to get checked to indicate this thing is moving in the right direction and the right guy is in charge of the team?
I don't know, because those aren't really conversations I have with those guys. But, I think you always want to see improvement, and in some ways outpacing what expectations are. Expectations weren't high for this team. I think if they didn't win another game this year, it would certainly be disappointing. But I think you've outperformed what people thought you would be. But you know how things go, Spence. Your expectations change as you see some stuff. And I don't think now 7 wins would be good enough. I think now, to your point, 9 or 10 wins are probably the expectation. So I think, I don't have any idea what Taylor Randall and Mark Harlan are looking at. That's well above my pay grade. But I think when you're in those positions, the thing you always want to see is, improvement. Is the team getting better as the year goes along? Is the team cohesive? I mean, if you're a Kansas fan right now, that's a disaster. I'm not saying they would run Bill Self off, but that's a disaster. They haven't gotten better, and the team's an absolute mess. Here, they have gotten better, and this is a really cohesive unit. So, I think they've outperformed their preseason expectations.
Do you think postseason basketball? Look, it's going to be tough, barring some crazy run in the Big 12 tournament, to make the NCAA tournament. I'm not sure anybody's expecting that, but NIT, is postseason basketball in the cards for this team, you think?
Well, I think it's postseason. I think to be serious about the NCAA tournament, because they didn't really have a marquee non-conference win. A win over a St. Mary's would have helped them a lot, or somebody along those lines. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, you win 3 of your last 5 games. That gets you to 10-10 in the Big 12, and then I believe 18 total wins overall. And then can you get 2 wins in Kansas City? Really, they have to improve that net ranking. The net ranking is now in the 70s. They've got to improve that. That's one of the measuring sticks the committee uses. So it's a long shot, I would say, at this point in time, but it's not impossible, because you've got good games coming up. You've got Arizona coming up. You've got West Virginia coming up. You've got BYU on the road coming up. And then whatever happens in Kansas City are likely to be, quad 1 games there too. So not impossible, but I would be surprised if they weren't an NIT team for sure, unless there was some sort of total collapse here over the last couple of weeks.
You mentioned Bill Self. I mean, Riles, they go down to Provo last night and they get dog walked. Like, it was wild. I'm watching the game going, what's going on? I mean, as you know, Bill's been there 22 years. During the first 20 seasons, he never lost more than 6 conference games, which is wild to think about, by the way, but he lost 8 last year. He's already lost 7 this year. And I'm just watching the game. Like, if I didn't know anything about college hoops and I turned on that game, I'd be like, these 2 teams don't even look like they should be on the same floor. They were not closing out. They were not getting back. They were not taking away airspace from shooters. And BYU, when they make shots, man, I think they're 15-0 when they shoot 48%. Like, they're really good when they get going. This is a Kansas team under Bill Self, Riles, that I do not recognize. I mean, Kansas is the bluest of the blue bloods in this conference. They were the preseason number 1 team for the 2nd year in a row. Last night was the worst loss a preseason number 1 team has ever suffered in the history of college basketball. How has this thing gone off the rails for your guy, Bill Self? And with 2 years now of subpar results, is there any conversation like there was with John Calipari in Kentucky that maybe this is not the right fit?
No, I don't think so. I think if anybody steps away, it'd probably be him. One of his best friends, from what I understand, is Jay Wright. And Jay Wright saw this coming 3 years ago and stepped away. Bill Self is already in the in the Basketball Hall of Fame. He's the winningest coach in Kansas history. His resume speaks. I would have thought he'd coach for a couple of more years. I don't know. Maybe he walks away this year. I have no inside information, but that was a team that looked like it just quit playing last night in Provo. And then to hear Self say after the game, we need to be apart for a while. We need to get away from each other. When do you ever hear a coach say we need to get away from each other? 3/4 of the way through a year. I mean, that's not good. They're like the island of misfit toys, Spence. They've got a bunch of individual players who are pretty good at other stops. They don't play together at all. And you can't win in basketball if you don't have a team that can play together.
You ever spent 72 straight hours in Provo with a group of people? You'd want to get away from each other if you did that as well, man. Like how many?
What didn't you spend 6 great days down there?
That was 8. Give me credit for all 8, please. It was the best 8 days of my life. All right, don't shortchange me, Bill. It was 8 days, but there are only so many. Like, are we having cubbies again? I don't blame them for wanting to spend some time apart. Like, how much swig can you actually put down?
It's a good point.
I'm just saying, man.
At the Creamery a couple of times too.
I'm just saying. All right, wanted to kick the tires with you on some college football storylines because for the second time in 4 months, the leadership of the Big Ten and the SEC are holding meetings to discuss the future of college football. My first question on this is simple. If you are not a member of the Big Ten and the SEC, should you be nervous about the conversations happening behind closed doors in New Orleans this week?
I think you should be, I don't know, nervous is the right word because it's not as if the Big 12 and the ACC are going to get locked out. But, yeah, you've got to be, head on a swivel here because it sounds like these guys are going to go behind closed doors and try to rewrite the rules again and add 2 more teams for each one of their conferences. You know what I mean? It sounds like they're trying to say, okay, we're going to stack the deck in our favor again. Where I'd really be concerned is if I was a group of 5 or, trying to get multiple at-larges in. So, yeah, it's not just the Big Ten and the SEC. It's the television networks that work with them. They're all working in concert here, but I don't think it's a great look when these guys are all supposed to be doing this together.
And I am not a college football alarmist because I ultimately believe the product is the Saturdays in the fall will always feel like Saturdays in the fall. And I also am a grown-up and I understand what a front-facing, revenue-generating entertainment business is about, and it is, whether you like it or not as a consumer, it is about making sure your shareholders get the best value they can for investing in your product. Love it or hate it, that's just kind of the deal. But it does seem like we are, if we're fair and honest here, part of me believes we're moving away from some of the things that as a college football fan, we all really love. And if there's 4 auto bids in every league, is there a danger of diluting a regular season that just seems prescient every weekend, which to me makes it great?
A little bit. I mean, I think this year was good because it made a lot of November games a lot more meaningful. I actually like the number 12. I don't know where you're at with it. I used to talk about 16 teams getting in. I'm actually okay with the number 12. I want them to reconfigure how they do the seeding for everything. But I thought the number 12 was pretty good with the top 4 seeds getting buys, playing on campus, stuff like that. I don't know that we need to go to 16 right now. Let's see how 12 plays for a couple of years. But I don't like the idea of power conferences continuing to kind of rig it behind the scenes without some sort of consensus. I'm with you. The games will always be the games, and college football is going to be great. But you also want your most meaningful games to feel like they're most meaningful too, and you want people to feel like they've got a chance. We know not everybody always has a chance, but you don't want to feel like the deck is stacked a certain way going into a playoff scenario. And if the Big Ten and the SEC get together and give themselves 2 more automatic bids, it kind of feels like they're stacking the deck a little bit.
Well, and it also is hard not to draw a straight line between the powerhouse brand of the Crimson Tide not getting in and what they're trying to accomplish. But look, if this is the way we're going to go, then just scrap the whole thing and make it a playoff system like the NFL does. Like, sorry, Bama, you lost 4 games. Like, don't lose 4 games and then you'll qualify for the CFP. But if we're going in the way of simply, allowing more auto bids for the power brokers in college football, why don't we just make a playoff that you have to qualify for? in a way that doesn't feel like it's simply and look, the bottom line is this: powerful television executives would love to have Alabama on their television network. And I know that's driving a lot of this. But if we're just going to have these AQs, these qualifications, like what's the point in keeping the system intact altogether? Because it feels like it is a slow crawl towards a complete dismantling of the thing anyway. I don't know why we don't just rip the Band-Aid off and put smart lawyers involved and get rid of the red tape and just move into what hopefully is the final iteration of this thing. It just feels like we're wasting time.
Well, I don't know why you've got a college football committee the way you have college basketball. I don't know why conferences have to have automatic berths outside of conference champions. Why does the SEC? I mean, if your teams are truly that good, they'll be selected. And in most years, the Big Ten and the SEC in football are likely going to have more bids anyway. But why are we going to give you auto bids? Why does anybody get auto bids? Your champion gets an auto bid, and then the committee selects. Because there might be a year where the SEC only has 2 good teams that deserve to be in there. They shouldn't get 4 when they only deserve 2. And I know that old line from The Unforgiven, deserves got nothing to do with it, but it kind of does. This is sports. It's supposed to be the best of the best, and there's no way to do that, without having a committee do it. But I don't like the idea of continually adding auto bids. I like the idea of everybody's conference champion getting in there, and then let the committee do their work with the other, 6 or 7 picks.
Give me a quick tease for, and this is called trying to fit in a college football topic in February because people love college football. Spring game, it's not tomorrow, but, ultimately it will be the first taste of college football for Ute fans. And I know in years past it has shown to be a scenario, and I understand why. The coach Witt and, the coaching staff, they don't necessarily want to play the majority of their better players because, injuries have been, kind of a thing over the past couple of years. So give us a quick spring game primer, random February college football topic. What should we be most excited about?
Well, I just think it's seeing Jason Beck's offense in live form. I mean, seeing it in practice is one thing. Not that the public gets to see practice unless something changes this spring. But I think people should be excited for seeing what the offense looks like. What's Devin Dampier look like in this offense? Who's going to be the backup quarterback to Devin Dampier? What do these running backs look like in this offense? Who are the wide receivers that emerge in this offense? Why Sean Parker from Washington State? Who's going to be the guy that he's throwing the football to? Is it Otto Tia? Is it Creed Whittemore? I think there's a lot. I think the offensive line is pretty well set because they invested well in the offseason in the offensive line. But I think I'm very curious to see the implementation, and obviously it will help having a quarterback that's played in that offense before. But I'm just very curious to see what it looks like going against what should be a very good defense of Morgan Scalley.
What, if anything, this feels like the deadest of dead periods in college football. The things that are most topical are the meetings such as what we've already discussed taking place in New Orleans and potential changes to the CFP. What's sort of the mode of operation up there right now in the football building for Kyle and his staff?
It's a lot of, meetings and things like that. They can only do so much. The spring football will begin right after spring break in mid-March, so they've got that. But, it's really strength and conditioning stuff right now with the players and probably some meeting stuff. And a lot of these new offensive coaches kind of getting to know their personnel a little bit. There's a lot of new faces. There's going to be 40-some new faces on this football team this year. So I think there's a lot of get-to-know-you type time right now and installation of the offense, at least in the books and the playbooks, and then spring football hits, and then it will really get going.
Before I set you loose, some news came down last week that after 20 years, Tom Homo stepping down as BYU's athletic director. For a number of years, you did this job over at this station and didn't just call games. You covered the landscape of sports across the state. And, Riles, I don't know if being the BYU AD is the hardest job in collegiate athletic administration, but it's got to be up there. And I think Tom, over the course of 20 years, did a really good job, deserves a lot of credit. And as he makes his way to find other things to do with his time, I wonder what your reaction was to the news and your thoughts on the job he did in 20 years down in Provo.
He did a great job, and I had a unique relationship with Tom because when I was still working at KSL in the old days and doing pre- and post-game for BYU and sideline reporting, Tom Holmoe was a great help to me before he was the athletic director. During the football games, he would stand on the sideline with me and point things out for me to look at. I think he had just been let go at Cal as their head football coach, so he was kind of in a no job type scenario, and he came back and he and I got to be friends for that one season. He was standing there on the sidelines with me, helping me out, pointing things out. And he and I always had a great relationship. I remember when I first got the University of Utah job and the play-by-play job, I saw him at a Utah BYU game. He came up, put his arm around me. He goes, I liked you better when you were wearing blue. But he was always great. And to this day, when I see him, I saw him at basketball tournaments, basketball games. I just think he's a great guy. And I think, somebody's going to have rather large shoes to fill down there in Provo.
All right, my guy. Appreciate the time on this Wednesday. Did you watch any of the All-Star weekend in pro basketball?
I didn't watch a second of it, Spence. Can you believe that?
Yeah, you didn't miss anything, unfortunately. Yeah. Probably the right call by you. Thanks for the time, Bill. We'll chat soon, okay?
See you, Spence.
The voice of the Utes, Bill Riley himself. Always appreciate Bill's time. Yeah, 3-2 in the Final Five, man. And Utah men's basketball could win 10 conference games. I did not think they'd even scratch it after beating both teams from Kansas. Kansas went down to Provo last night, and they got their brakes blown off. BYU smoked them. All right, 3 hours down, 1 hour to go. The final hour of the program on a Wednesday afternoon comes your way. Coming up next right here on ESPN 700. All right, what's up? Drive at 5 time. Your commute home on a Wednesday afternoon / evening starts right about now. It is a very February day outside. It's about 38 degrees, a little cloudy here in downtown Salt Lake City, Utah. And as it is every single day, it's good to have you along for the ride. Welcome into the 5 o'clock hour of the program. RSL is in action as we speak. It is CONCACAF Champions Cup Round 1. RSL Herediano, right now, through 31 minutes of play, it is 0-0. It is scoreless. Why do I feel like every soccer hater, every time I give a scoreboard update, when I say 0-0, is like, yes, of course it is? Too many of these games end in scoreless ties, man.
Yeah, what did CK say? 1-1 draw is how he predicted.
He said 1-1 draw. I think I said 1-0 RSL with my guy Diogo on a free kick.
I think RSL wins, too.
Trey says 4-0 RSL.
I think RSL wins CONCACAF.
What? You think RSL wins the whole tournament?
I don't know.
You know what? I like it. Just own the prediction.
I just want Pablo and my guys to succeed.
Well, you're about the good vibes just like Pablo is. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
You're a vibe guy. 5 o'clock hour of the program. We'll keep you up to date because I know you're on the edge of your seats for RSL Herediano updates in the CONCACAF Champions Cup Round 1, first leg. Round 2, we'll be back here in Utah. It should be right there, right outside of the window that I'm pointing out, where there's a parking lot instead of a soccer stadium. But, hey, yesterday's news. It is so cruel that every day I come into work and I have to look at that parking lot. That's where we wanted the stadium.
When they released the kits, right, they had a nice fancy Salt Lake City video that they put out, and it's got the grid, and it said all roads lead to soccer. And I got to be honest with you guys, only one does, and it's way out there.
It's way too far
way
south.
out there.
But obviously it's fun to have RSL back. 5 o'clock hour of the program today brought to you by Burt Brothers. With over 30 years of experience in nearly 30 locations, Burt Brothers ASE-certified technicians bring expertise and professionalism to every interaction, industry-leading warranties, and low-price tire guarantees. One-stop shop for reliable repairs and maintenance, from tires and alignments to fluids and brakes, offering a full range of automotive services tailored to meet your needs. Now offering value tire options such as Americas and Summit tires, starting at just $69 with warranties that go up to 70,000 miles. As one of the few AAA certified shops in Utah, Burt Brothers upholds the highest standards in automotive service. Stop by Burt Brothers or Tire Busters locations or schedule an appointment today to experience the trusted service that has made them a Utah favorite for over 3 decades. Burt Brothers, doing it better since day one. More information online at burtbrothers.com. All right, the second half of the NBA season gets rolling tonight, technically. The Jazz will be in action tomorrow taking on OKC. But tonight there is a game that features the LA Lakers and the Charlotte Hornets from Crypto.com Arena in Los Angeles, where LeBron James is listed as questionable. Okay, Porter, so here's the deal. LeBron is going to play. They're listing him as questionable to further the narrative that he actually was hurt and couldn't play in the All-Star game.
Oh.
This is honestly what's going on because, you know, it's the continuation of him just calling the shots. And so I'm sure through back channels, he has decided to tell people, no, I'm actually hurt and I'm questionable. If he doesn't play tonight, I will eat crow. My guess is he plays tonight, and this is all this is a smokescreen.
Well, and the Lakers, and more so even you can go back to the Cleveland days. LeBron, when he's playing, and when he's missed any sort of time, they're coy with it. It's game time decision, and then on day of game, it's probable, and then during the game, obviously he ends up playing, and yeah, I mean they play the politics of it day in and day out. So the fact that they're gonna do it to come off the All-Star break is no surprise. You would have seen it probably regardless. And conveniently may cover for some All-Star stuff. I will say, I was mentioning the politics of it yesterday and how LeBron plays that power game. The thought that Zach brought up about him not being stoked about how the All-Star weekend was going and maybe just being, all right, I'm going to get out of here. I'm not saying it's not selfish, but knowing in following LeBron for so long, I don't think that's completely out of the question. I wouldn't put that past him.
Our guy went full conspiracy theory earlier. Now this was Amin El-Hassan. Oh, we should get Amin on soon if he has time. Amin El-Hassan, Tom Haberstroh, two friends of this show, have a basketball podcast called Basketball Illuminati. And look, those are my guys. But whenever I tune into that, I'm like, yeah.
Oh, They reach intentionally.
It feels like I'm listening to a Joe Rogan basketball podcast because it's all conspiracies about this. So their assertion is LeBron was giving a silent protest because the younger players were given access to play on the All-Star stage on Sunday.
And for me, it's not just the rising stars, but it's the entire, like, we're going to stop and do a YouTube thing in the middle of the game. It's the whole thing around it has become, as you have pointed out, less about just the All-Star game and more about everything else. And if LeBron were to protest that, might be a good way to do it.
Well, and here's the only issue I have, whether it's LeBron apparently protesting that the young players can play on Sunday or Draymond Green saying the whole thing sucks. This is your fault.
And it's your product, too.
You guys as players had a chance to continue what was really cool for basketball fans for a lot of years, man. I'm telling you, this is not just me as a basketball guy talking about how much fun All-Star games used to be. Any basketball fan eagerly looked forward to what was the best pickup basketball game in the world. And so I have no space for Draymond Green complaining or LeBron James protesting or any player complaining about the deal when it's their fault that this thing has devolved into such a cluster, you know what?
Yeah, I mean, to be part of the problem is one thing, but to go out and outwardly be against it when you are part of that issue, well, I guess that's why we're where we are.
Yep, well said. All right, following a joint meeting today between the athletic directors representing their respective conferences in the SEC and the Big Ten. So it is just the SEC and the Big Ten, and I think there are a lot of issues with this, but they are the power brokers in college football. The Golden Rule. Porter, why don't you remind the listeners what the Golden Rule is on this program?
The man with the gold, he makes the rules.
They do, and they are the men with the gold. So the SEC and the Big Ten, who bring in the most revenue in college football by far, are meeting this week without the Big 12, without the ACC, without any G5 representation about the future of college football. And we're starting to get some information about some of the things they've talked about. So Greg Sankey, SEC commissioner, and Tony Petitti, the Big Ten commissioner, came out today after the meeting and said they agreed that the way teams are seeded in the 12-team CFP playoff format will and should and will change this fall. Now, ultimately, according to Greg Sankey, he says, quote, "I'm prepared to vote for a seeding change, but it has to be unanimous." And I'm not really sure that that's anything other than lip service, because this, again, is the Big Ten and it is the SEC. And apparently the Notre Dame athletic director, Pete, I think it's Bevilacqua. That's probably not it, but it's Pete somebody, that dude, is also on board. So they roped in the Notre Dame AD in addition to just the conference commissioners from the Big Ten and the SEC. So another suggestion that has been made that probably is going to come to fruition potentially as early as this fall is the field should be, well, I will not say should be, because I kind of like the 12, but the field potentially will be expanded, and therefore the model would now include 4 automatic qualifiers from both the SEC and the Big Ten, 2 automatic qualifiers from both the Big 12 and the ACC, and then potentially a single automatic qualifier from G5, and then depending on the expansion number, it could be as few as 1 or maybe 3 at-large bids. According to, this is Heather Dinich, let's give her some credit for doing this good work. This would also, as far as the seed goes, would open up the door for Notre Dame, which can't win a conference title as an independent, to earn a first-round bye as a top 4 seed. So a lot of things at stake. I mean, with the college football news cycle pretty much dried up right now, these meetings are garnering a lot of attention, so we understand what the landscape of college football could look like as early as this fall. We started the show off with this, and we talked a little college basketball. So the University of Kansas Jayhawks, the bluest of blue bloods in the Big 12, rolled into the state of Utah over the weekend, then through last night, and did not lead for 1 second. They never led the Utes. They never led the Cougars. BYU dog-walked them last night at the Marriott Center in Provo. And it was over early, and they never looked back. Bill Self has been coaching at Kansas for 22 years. During his first 20 years, he never lost more than 6 conference games. They lost 8 conference games a year ago. They've already lost 7 conference games this year. that tied for the largest margin of defeat in the history of Bill Self's tenure at Kansas. The Kansas Jayhawks, the winningest program in the history of college basketball, that's the third worst loss they've ever suffered. It is the worst loss that a former AP number one preseason team has ever suffered in the history of college basketball. It was a bloodbath. Kansas, of course, will fall out of the top 25. My guess is BYU leaps in now. And BYU, by any bracketology, by any measurable metric, is certainly an NCAA tournament team. But last night felt real. It was like a moment that felt like kind of seismic if you're a BYU basketball fan, because during the NBA All-Star break, no NBA last night, the eyes of the sports world on ESPN to watch BYU Kansas, and every college basketball podcast I saw this morning led with this game. Now, from a national perspective, topically, it was more like, what is going on with Kansas? Because, look, I'm not taking anything away from either Utah or BYU, but this is as bad of a Kansas basketball team as I've seen in a long time, and they were the preseason number one. They've got like 4 pros on this roster. They didn't even provide any pushback defensively last night for BYU. Wide open shots after wide open shots. BYU, when they knock down shots, I think I read they're 15-0 when they shoot 49%. That's a team that really is make or miss. And ultimately, when it is make, they are tough. And ultimately, BYU down the stretch, we'll see what they're able to do. But they have a chance to win 11 or 12 conference games. They're 31 in the net. And if you're not going to win the Big 12 on Selection Sunday, and obviously the Big 12 tournament will be an indicator of what we'll see, and if you win the thing, you're in. But if you don't win the Big 12 tournament, you really want to be in the 20s when it comes to your nets to feel safe when it comes to conference selection Sunday. I should say Selection Sunday, to see if you're getting into the NCAA tournament. So both teams have 5 games left. The final game of the regular season will feature these two teams, Utah and BYU, down in Provo on March the 8th. Of course, BYU will have some real payback on their mind on the Utah basketball side of things. If Craig is able to find a way to win 3 of his final 5 games, guess what? Utah basketball is a 10-win conference team. Barring something entirely unforeseen, I have a hard time believing that the Utes can make the NCAA tournament this year, but at least we'll see some postseason basketball, and maybe they go on some crazy run. I mean, look, the top portion of the Big 12 is still very elite. I just don't know that Kansas is one of those elite teams this year. BYU now holds the tiebreak over Kansas and Baylor to get a nice path to that 5 seed for the conference tournament. Houston is, of course, the class of the league this year. Then it's Arizona, Iowa State, Texas Tech, and then BYU with a 1-game lead over Kansas and Baylor. But essentially that's a 2-game lead because they own the tiebreaker. Utah finds themselves right behind both Kansas, Baylor, and TCU at 7 and 8. They're tied with K-State, just 1 game ahead of West Virginia. So it's almost March, right around the corner. College basketball kind of heating up. Let's get a quick check-in with RSL before we catch a break. Tubi is the streaming app that you have to use to watch this, and it's refreshing. 0-0, right? No surprise there. 45th minute now, so they're almost at halftime. Herediano and RSL, CONCACAF Champions Cup, round 1. And round 2 will be back here in the market. So we'll keep you up to date on the RSL match, but we'll catch a break. Second Utah State Aggies in action tonight. They welcome in San Jose State. Utah State coming off another loss to New Mexico, who now has a 2-game lead in conference play. So the NBA has one game tonight, then a full slate of action tomorrow. The Jazz are in action tomorrow against OKC. Got some good college basketball tonight. Got a little Arkansas-Auburn. We have Bama and Mizzou, 2 top 15 teams. St. John's, Rick Pitino has that team back in the top 10. They're on the road at DePaul. So it's that time of year. March is right around the corner. And we've talked a lot of college basketball on the program. 4 nations face off tomorrow. Boston is the city, and it's a great domestic hockey city. We had Neil Smith on earlier. If you missed that, I thought it was really, really good. A lot of perspective today on the history of the rivalry between the U.S. and the U.S. team and the Canadian team. And Neil is a Canadian-born hockey savant and has now lived in America for a number of years, so some good perspective there. Reminder, we will have the 4 Nations final for you on the radio station tomorrow after the Craig Smith Coaches Show, which will begin at 6 o'clock when we say goodnight. All right, Porter, I'm going to ask you the same question I asked Zach Harper. Philosophical question. Found myself unable to sleep last night, which unfortunately is part of your boy's existence. I'm doing my best. I'm trying to get better habits and such. Reading about the fact that there is about a 3.5% chance an asteroid is going to hit the Earth in 2032.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, we're done.
Yes.
Like, not even like, hey, maybe, nope, it's all over. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but according to scientists that study these things, there is a 3.5% chance that in 2032, an asteroid that is called YN4 is en route and will hit the planet, and it will evaporate all of us. If you had a chance to have prior knowledge of this, would you want to know, or would you rather just have the situation where, like, hey, just live your life, and at some point it's going to happen?
Yeah, it is a good question, philosophically.
It's only 20 milligrams.
And the highest chance, by the way, of this happening since 2004. In 2004, we had a 2.7% chance of it happening, and it flew right by us. I would like to know. I'd like to have it. If you give me the opportunity, I'm going to want a little bit of a heads up. That way I can watch it happen. I can look forward to it. I can look at it with a different perspective, right? You can, if you know it's going to happen, and are you saying like not 3.1%, but like 100%? It's going to happen.
Yeah, like this is the deal. On this day, and by the way, how would you watch it happen? Because I don't think you can watch it. I just think it happens and then we're all done.
I'm sure you could see it coming for at least some sort of time.
Huh.
If they, I mean, apparently they can already see it, that it's on its way. So, I don't know. The different perspective that you're going to take looking at this, Spence, is that it's like a good reset. The Earth needs a cleanse of some sort, and it's bringing it by way of asteroid.
Well, that's not a cleanse. That's we're done. We're evaporated. This will not.
We are.
This will not cleanse the Earth. This will get rid of the planets. Like we're
I'm
done.
sure something will rise from the ashes, as it did the first time, according to scientists, allegedly. So you think, depending on what you believe,
you think the planet survives, but people are done,
and life finds a different way.
Look at you.
Maybe it's telling us that this is not the correct course, and the asteroid will knock us off a little bit, but not necessarily the end, just a change.
Do you think some humans survive?
Ooh.
Because what I'm reading is if it does hit, it's expected to completely evaporate the human race.
From what I understand, yeah, it would not be good. I bet you.
it would not be good.
I bet you. And here's the other thing. If we have good enough notice, I do have a place I could get to with protection, and I'm sure there's other people that have
talking about
that have places with some protection.
Where could you go to be protected from an asteroid?
I have plans, if just in case. I'm not,
You have asteroid contingent plans? That is wild.
I don't know about asteroid specific.
See,
Fallout specific,
okay,
I guess.
I'm not sure if your underground bunker in Summit County is going to protect you from an asteroid, bud.
That's the hope, though.
Okay. See, I debated this in my own head last night as I was reading this, trying to go to sleep. And initially, I'm like, you know what? I don't want to know. I'm just going to live my life, and when it comes, it comes.
Fair.
And then I realized the type of whatever you want to call it, revenge, payback, that you could enact on people over the final few days.
Right.
Without any repercussion. Like, they don't know it's coming, you do. And so anyone that's ever wronged you, it is on like Donkey Kong. Give me that final 48 hours of existence. Is that petty of me?
A little bit, but that's okay.
Yeah.
You could have a really good, depending on how you look at it, or really loud exit if you had the heads up. But I'll be in my bunker.
For the kids in the car, this is nothing you need to worry about, okay? If you're listening to the show with children in the car, you guys are safe. You're good. Mom and dad have you taken care of.
Hopefully, if they have a bunker.
Don't ruin it. There are children listening. I don't want them to think the planet's going to explode.
It might, though.
I know.
3.1% chance.
I am doing a thing for the kids, Porter. I'm doing it. I know you don't like kids. I know you don't care about the kids. I like the kids.
Listen, it's not that I don't like the kids.
Oh, it very much is that you don't like the kids. You've been very clear.
I'm just not going out of my way for the kids.
Okay.
They got parents. They can handle it.
All right, fair enough. All right, time to say goodnight for a Wednesday show. Porter, what comes our way on a Thursday edition of the program?
On a Thursday edition of The Drive, we'll chat with our guy Andy Larson, Jazz, RSL, CONCACAF. I'm sure we'll go in each and every direction with Andy. You mentioned it during this final segment. We talked a lot of college hoops on the show today. That is, well, naturally, because the football season is over, Ken Pomeroy in studio talking some college hoops with us. Utes, BYU, Big 12 latest, headed up to Logan, I'm sure, as well, with what Utah State has been doing. Sean Mooney will stop by the program. And I did reach out to Amin. We're gonna hope to get Amin on the show as well in the very near future. Maybe some RSL stuff. They've got some travel tomorrow, but on the heels of a CONCACAF matchup, we may have one of them as well.
All right, there you go. Excuse me. So make us a part of your Thursday afternoon. With that, we'll say goodnight for a Wednesday show. Special thank you. Zach Harper, Chris Camerani, Neil Smith, and Bill Riley. For any of the sound you may have missed from the show, website, ESPN700sports.com. Make sure to download our mobile app. Take us on the go. It's how I listen to our station. That ESPN 700 app is available in the App Store and then also the Google Play Store. And then finally, for what we do in our space every afternoon for 4 hours, we have a podcast. I know, shocking. But check it out wherever you get your shows. Ours is there. It's called The Drive with Spence Checketts. We'd appreciate a rating and a review. If you say nice things in the comments and give us all the stars, it actually helps. For Porter, I'm Spence. Saying goodnight. Enjoy your Wednesday evening. We'll talk to you on a Thursday drive. And as always, you can catch it right here on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Proud to be part of UT.